sausage with cheese after the opera, to the always look good waterproof mascara. From ice cream and dumplings perfectly combined, to a being inside you, the unconscious mind. From the jumping and dancing self-tan teen, to the sewing machine. From a place between art with the world's biggest bedroom, to my Wi-Fi is good, thanks the spread spectrum. From really crispy schnitzel and the schmaltz it was dipped in, to this place of preparation. You know, fitted kitchen. From many bright colours and the paintings with the boobs, to the 3 minutes daily, toothpaste in a tube. The inventions from Vienna, this original blend, it has always been there, from crazy to grand. Vienna Up 21, Europe's most diverse startup summit. From networks to workshops, from talents to experts, from ideas to pitches. From the 27th of April to the 12th of May. Register online, participate online, now on viennaup.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the 6th edition of the International B2B Software Days, dealing with what else? The future of digital business. We are broadcasting live today, really live, we're on air now, from the Brutkasten, a startup hub here in the center of Vienna, and we welcome all of you. More than 2,000 participants taking part in this year's very unique and very different event, different due to the circumstances, also different, with more B2B meetings than ever and more workshops than ever. And with a grande finale on Wednesday afternoon, Austria versus Sweden, a panel discussion between our Austrian Minister for Digital and Economic Affairs, Ms. Margarete Schramböck, and Mr. Anders Ygeman, Minister for Energy and Digital Development from Sweden, being our partnering country this year. My name is Iris Malovic. Go ahead and call me Iris. I work for the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, also known as WKÖ, and together today with my colleague and co-host Iraklis Agiovlasitis from the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, better known as FFG, it is our true honor to lead you through the program this morning. By the way, in case you haven't guessed by now, Iraklis and I were actually not really professional moderators. We're only in disguise today. So when we're not pretending to be TV stars, we help you to innovate and grow internationally in the framework of the Enterprise Europe Network.
And we are very much looking forward to hosting you and seeing you again behind our desks in the future or on our screens. Being the Enterprise Europe Network, we have also adapted our services and we are ready to meet you up with our advisory services at any point in time, whenever you call us, be it digitally or physically. Hopefully in the future again physically. But back to the program of today. Yes, Iris, we are talking about a very comprehensive program. We have a unique opportunity to give you all the information about the latest trends in the digital business. And it will also have for you the opportunity to find your next business or cooperation partners, research projects, cooperation projects, technology cooperations. Everything is here. As we have more than 2,000 participants joining us for these 3 days, the odds are on your side. But what can you expect from us here today? We will start right away with a welcome address from the 6 organizers of the 6th International B2B Software Days. And then we will go right ahead to our first 3 keynotes of the day. Afterwards, 10 minutes, refreshing coffee break. And right afterwards, then our last 4 keynotes of the day. This program will take us up to 1 p.m., more or less. And at that point in time, with our heads full of ideas, we will head out to get some food into our system, wherever this out might be for you. As far as we are concerned, here in the broadcasting studio, we might order some Greek gyros or Wiener Schnitzel, whatever you prefer. But before we start with the official program of the B2B Software Days, bear with me for one last moment. I would like to warmly welcome all Enterprise Europe Network partners who helped us make this event happen. This year we have more than 130 partners from 60 countries worldwide. And I would also warmly like to thank our sponsors for the day, the Austrian Federal Ministry for Digital and Economic Affairs and its initiative Go International, the Global Incubator Network, WeAccelerate, Plug and Play, and of course, our partners from Sweden, the Swedish Embassy in Vienna and the innovation agency Vinnova, who joined us together with a great team of companies. And we are honored to be hosting them this year as our official partner country. And we are looking forward to welcoming all keynote speakers tomorrow from Sweden. Last but not least, the 6th International B2B Software Days are proud to be part of Vienna Up 21, the biggest startup event of its kind with more than 100 live streams in the past 10-12 days.
Ladies and gentlemen, 6 editions of the B2B Software Days, they do not go unnoticed and they don't happen by accident. So 10 years ago, 6 players of different sectors decided to join forces to make the B2B Software Days happen. And now, as you can see on your screen, it is our pleasure to introduce the 6 directors, actually our bosses, of our organizing team. Some of them are joining us live today on stage, some from their desks at work, some from their home offices, and some of them sent you a welcome message. So here with us today and in person is the man welcoming us on behalf of the city of Vienna. Welcome, Mr. Gerhard Hirzi, Director of the Vienna Business Agency.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Mr. Hirzi, may I start with my first question? Today is the first day of the B2B Software Days, but we are almost at the end of Vienna Up, this digital festival that was organized for the first time in Vienna for the past 2 weeks. And could you tell us some highlights of the Vienna Up and what's planned for next year?
Yes, clearly. As you already mentioned, Vienna Up 21 is the biggest startup festival in Central and Eastern Europe, if not in all of Europe this year. More than 100 conferences organized by 40 international and national partners, co-organized and curated by the Vienna Business Agency. And it was really amazing to see the eagerness of all these partners to put a focus on the startup location and the business location, Vienna. 100 events covering almost all industries, from smart city to life sciences, from fintech to social impact business to digitalization as today. And if I am to highlight something in particular, I think the B2B Software Days will be quite unique. And talking about 2022, I think it might be a little bit unfair to the events that are still going on to speculate already about next year. But I have to admit I have an idea in my mind, a nice idea, a nice picture of thousands of innovative people walking through our beautiful city from one startup event to the next. And let's see if that picture becomes a reality in 2022.
We sincerely hope so. But for the city of Vienna, digitalization is also of strategic importance, of utmost importance. And Vienna wants to coin a Vienna style of digitalization. What does this mean exactly, and what are the goals?
Vienna has already had a very high regard for social responsibility, for inclusion, for participation, for transparency, and this is think of social housing, for instance, and this is not different with digitalization. We just have to transfer these principles into the digital world. Our idea of a modern city is not a gigantic chatbot which is steered by artificial intelligence, but a caring and an efficient framework that safeguards the well-being of its citizens. And therefore, digital solutions from Vienna shall stand for and will stand for openness, for transparency, for security. And the name of that approach is digital humanism.
Really exciting. Thank you very much, Mr. Hirzi, for hosting the 6th International B2B Software Days and for being here with us today. We are really looking forward for this Vienna-style digitalization and, of course, Vienna Up 2022.
Pleasure.
I'm now calling Mr. Florian Frauscher, Director General of the Austrian Ministry for Digital and Economic Affairs and head of the initiative Go International. Florian, are you with us?
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Since the very beginning, you've been supporting this event. Today, however, we meet in a very different setting, under very different circumstances, because we're all 14 months into a pandemic that changed the way the world works, and for one way or the other, we all had to become more digital. So, according to you, how can small and medium-sized enterprises take advantage of the opportunities offered by digitalization? And how important is digital business to promote growth and, in particular, to ensure a sustainable economic recovery?
First of all, let me thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today with you, and I'm really happy that this event can take place in this digital way. I would also like to really welcome our friends from Sweden, as you mentioned, our partner country for this year. The pandemic, as you have said, completely changed our lives. But as Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. This is true, at least when it comes to digitalization. We have seen a boost in the last 14 months in digitalization when it comes to economy and also when it comes to society. We had to deal with a lot of new challenges like remote leadership, like have conferences in a digital way like today, but also we had to implement a lot of new business models and to implement new technologies. Just think about click and collect, just think about so many new online opportunities that we have now. But in order to recover from the current crisis and to be more resilient in the future, we still need to drive the benefits from the lessons learned. Austria is, when it comes to digitalization, in a good way. We are on the 13th place in the Digital Economy and Society Index of the European Union. That's above the European average, but not so good as we would like to be. As example, like Sweden is number 2 in this index, so there is still a long way to go, but we also have a lot of advantages in Austria. When it comes to digital and mobile government, we rank 2nd place in the European Union. So I think we both we all can learn a lot from each other, but we have really a lot of challenges. We see 3 main topics when it comes to SMEs. We see a lack of awareness, we see a lack of resources in matter of time and of finance, and we see a lack of innovation and knowledge. This is true especially for SMEs, and 99% of the companies in Austria are SMEs. So we have to address these challenges, and we as a Ministry for Digital and Economic Affairs have already implemented a lot of different measures. For example, SME digital or SME e-commerce that help the SMEs to adopt to digital business models. Or we implemented in Austria already 8 different digital innovation hubs that help to accelerate R&D. And these digital innovation hubs are also coming now on a European level. We are really happy to see that. And third point, we implemented a lot of initiatives to skill people on the work, on the job, but also to create new high qualified workforce. That's, in my opinion, one of the most important things that we have to do. With our partner country today, with Sweden, we have a really pioneer in the field of digitalization and innovation. And I look really forward to have discussions with them, but also with all the other participants to have a lively exchange, to have the keynotes, and to have 3 amazing days together with you. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the next days.
Indeed, quite a few challenges ahead, but also a lot of initiatives for our small and medium-sized enterprises in Vienna. Thank you very much, Mr. Florian Frauscher. We do trust that you'll also find some of the upcoming keynotes interesting, and we'll see you in 2 years' time, hopefully in person again. Thank you.
And now, connecting to the FFG and calling live Ms. Andrea Höglinger, representing the Managing Director of the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, Henrietta Egert, who could not join us today. Andrea, are you here with us?
Yes, of course, I'm here.
Great, thank you very much. Andrea, you are the head of the Department European and International Programs at the Austrian Research Promotion Agency. And Austria is one of the countries with the largest research intensities amongst the EU 27. Could you tell us the secret why and how important are research and funding opportunities, especially for the digital business?
Yes, the Iris, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome also from my side to the 6th International B2B Software Days. And I'm happy to be digitally present with you on one of the biggest events taking place this year in Vienna with a focus on digital technologies. And I know how time-consuming it is to organize such events in times of crisis. And I would really like to start with a big thank you to the whole organizing team. And it's really a pleasure for me to join you today. And Iris, you have mentioned at the beginning that you both are not TV stars and professional moderators, but I think you could be. So really, you do an excellent job beside your professional expertise in this field. So really great, and thank you very much for doing that. But now to your question, Eric, of course, research and innovation funding plays in general an extremely important role for the competitiveness of countries. And funding is gaining in importance in times of crisis. And we as funding agency are challenged in times like this, as many other business areas at the moment. And in my opinion, it's very important to offer a broad portfolio. And I think having a broad portfolio on the one hand and setting priorities on the other hand, that's no contradiction. I think both is needed. And maybe that's an advantage from us as FFG, that we really can offer both a broad bottom-up portfolio and a focused top-down thematic portfolio. And I think it's really important that there's an alignment between bottom-up and top-down priorities. So it shouldn't be only a broad portfolio and funding this and that and so everything what is coming in. It's really important to align this bottom-up and top-down priorities at national level as well as at European level. And let me just mention a few examples from FFG. So many people are currently talking about the twin transition, the digital and green transition, and we as FFG are engaged in both areas. For example, a recent analysis of our portfolio has shown that we are currently investing every second funding euro in digitization projects. And I think, and in addition, we all know that digital technologies are indispensable when we are talking about societal challenges. And therefore, digital solutions play a really extremely important role in thematic priorities, or thematic programs like mobility of the future or circular economy or all climate research-related programs. And most of our thematic priorities are really challenge-oriented, or the new wording is mission-oriented. And what we do is really we're funding the collaboration between universities, SMEs, startups, and our funding rate is very high. So we really engage the Austrian R&I ecosystem to strengthen their capacities in all these thematic-oriented and challenge-oriented programs. And as we are also acting as national contact point for many European funding programs, the most important program is Horizon Europe. And Horizon Europe offers, with the 3 pillars and the budget, about 95 billion euros for the next 7 years, many possibilities and opportunities for the European innovation ecosystem. And as probably most of the participants know, Horizon 2020 was extremely competitive. And to be honest, I do not expect less competition in Horizon Europe. And therefore, I think it's also very important to align our national portfolio to the European portfolio in the best possible way. And so one of our goals is to support excellent players at national level. For example, the Austrian University, Johannes Fröhlich, the Vice Rector of the Technical University of Vienna, will come after my greetings on the floor. And I think it's really important that we support the excellent national players on their successful way at European level. And that's, for us, it's one indicator how successful our national funded actors, companies, enterprises, universities are at EU level, because the competition is much higher at EU level than it is at national level, even it's already competitive at national level. So, but of course, we also host other European funding programs like Eureka, and which is a quite complicated funding program for international projects. And just to let you know, we are very proud that we are hosting the Eureka chairmanship in Austria, and there will be another important big event next week, the European Global Innovation Summit, together with our colleagues from Styria. So I'm really looking forward to these software days, and I'm really happy about our partner country, Sweden. And I wish you all the best, and I wish all participants that they really can strengthen their networks for the future and for the future of Europe. Thank you very much, Irakli and Iris, and toi for this event.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for your introduction, for these kind words. And I think that our guests and audience are already getting excited with all these different funding instruments that you mentioned. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure now to call our next guest, I think at his home office. His name has already been mentioned. Professor Johannes Fröhlich, Vice Rector for Research and Innovation at the Technical University of Vienna. Professor Fröhlich, are you here with us?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Professor Fröhlich, what is the importance of business cooperation for a university like yours, the Technical University of Vienna, in particular with regards to the challenges of digitization?
Well, as I only have 2 minutes available, unfortunately without 2 millions, I shall focus, so to say, on 2 bullet points and start with some figures. Basic and applied research, also at TU Wien, as other universities, is driven by third-party funds, and the global budget from the public sector is mainly used for running costs. In our case, this is around about 250 million euros per year. It's a lot of money, but not enough for research. An additional roughly 90 million euros per year are acquired from third-party fundings. And 2 important categories thereof are 16 million euros from FFG. Andrea already mentioned the importance of FFG for applied research. And very important for a technical university, 22 million per year from direct bilateral cooperations with industry. Considering that most of the FFG funding also refers to projects with companies, it turns out that at least 1/3, more likely some 40% of our third-party funds are connected to business corporations. I think this is self-explaining for the answering of the first part of your question. Next point, I will briefly go to the context of the challenges of digitalization, and I will reflect that with one of the important examples of TU Wien. Of course, I could name some more. TU Wien is core partner of one of the KICs of the so-called knowledge innovation communities of the EU, the so-called EIT manufacturing of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. One of the big issues of this enterprise, with more than 50 partners from industry, academia, and research institutions, is to further develop manufacturing by integrating new seamlessly interconnecting technologies through empowerment by digitalization. Thus, we will link our research, education, and innovation activities in fields such as manufacturing, informatics, and electrical engineering with industry, companies, and in particular SMEs. And this is a challenge. This follows our mission to build up as a tech university a value chain from basic research via applied research to innovation. And digitalization is one of the important cross-sectional driving forces.
Thank you very much, Professor Fröhlich. I personally think we should get together after the B2B software days to see how business can cooperate with the university even more to create synergies and gain more effects for both sides. Thank you very much. Back to you, Iraklis.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, also joining us live from her office, this time in Linz, Miss Angelika Serey-Froschauer. Good morning, Miss Serey-Froschauer. Are you here with us?
Yes, good morning, everybody.
Great, we see you great. Miss Serey-Froschauer, you successfully run a business yourself, and you're also the elected representative of the ICT companies, of the ICT sector in Austria. Amongst them, of course, software businesses. What do you think the future holds for these businesses?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to welcome you all on this amazing virtual B2B software days, and many congrats to all organization, people and partners. Thank you so much. Regarding to your question, yeah, the digital transformation is really the main challenge of our time for all of our companies, of all business sectors, of all sizes, for smalls, for medium, and for big companies, from the local, of the regional, from the national or the international, and the operating companies as well. From an economic perspective, Austria must take a leading role in innovation and developing new services. Therefore, we think there is a strong demand for digital knowledge-based service providers right now, and we think the next months and the next years also. We need exactly these specialists to master the many challenges we face in our businesses at the moment and in the future. These are the ones building bridges between science and business. It's very important to build the bridge we have heard before in the statements between science and business, and highlighting new opportunities and setting the stage for the innovation-based success.
Great. So my second question is, what do businesses really need to build these bridges? And what's your recommendation for our participants here today?
Yeah, as we have heard before, our Austrian companies need well-trained professionals now. And therefore, first and foremost, we need to fight for the skills shortage in the ITC sector. Austria is an innovative business location and a hub for innovative companies and startups. And we need to build on that through collaboration platforms and funding opportunities, as you can, and we can do it today and the next 2 days. I highly recommend the B2B meetings in the afternoon. Use all the opportunities for networking and find new businesses, partners. In time like these, nothing is more important as you can do networking and finding new business. And I wish you all an interesting and inspiring business event and many successful businesses in the future.
Thank you very much, Ms. Serey-Froschauer. I think our participants are already getting motivated for the meetings. Have a great day and enjoy the B2B software days.
Last but not least, we welcome Ms. Mariana Kühnel. She's our Deputy Secretary General of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, or WKÖ in short. Unfortunately, she cannot be with us today, but she did send a video welcome message with her regards. Action, please.
Good morning and a warm welcome on behalf of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber to this year's B2B Software Days. It's always nice to see things grow and flourish. And that not only goes for children or trees, this as well goes for ideas like this conference. We are part of the organizing team of this event already right from the beginning 10 years ago, and it has been an outstanding journey. not only for the conference that grew in content and scale, but as well for the entrepreneurs that participate in our event, because it changed a lot the last 10 years as well for doing business. Especially the last 12 months showed us what is important. Important is solidarity. Important is as well finding solutions together. And not only for finding the vaccine against the virus or how to deal with single market restrictions, it's as well important to stay innovative and look outside the box to find new ways. Especially this will be the focus of this conference today, because on the agenda is nothing less than the future. The future of artificial intelligence, the future of data, business models of the future. And it's obvious that we need to explore this future and to explore the digitalization. This is our core mission as a Federal Economic Chamber, to explore with you in Austria as well as abroad economic and hopefully digital growth together with the Enterprise Europe Network. We are enablers. You are enablers. We are bridge builders and you are bridge builders. And together we are the bridge builders into the future. This is what we try with this conference. Bridge builders with exciting keynote speakers, bridge builders with the B2B possibilities to find your future business partner or potentially the missing link for your product, your service, or your technology. And with that, I wish you an exciting conference. And as the writer Oscar Wilde once put it, the future belongs to those who recognize opportunities before they become obvious. Stay healthy and safe and enjoy.
This was Mariana Kühnel. For you, ladies and gentlemen, now it's my pleasure to say thank you and goodbye to all of our opening speakers this morning. Thank you very much for having joined us. Take care, stay healthy. Bye-bye. And before we get ready for our first keynote this morning, Iraklis will now fill you in on some digital details for today's conference. Iraklis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Iris. So, our event is all about digital business. And it's been more than a year now that business has become more digital than ever. We have become more digital than ever. We are used to working from home, using digital tools to communicate with our families, with our friends. We are used to speaking on camera before you without minding if you're drinking coffee or tea, if you wear today a business outfit or something more casual. This is totally up to you. But we do care about one thing: your active participation. We are streaming the whole event, all 3 days live, so that you can interact with us and our speakers at all times, from wherever you are. And we also want to create a big buzz before, during, and after the event. So we ask you kindly to use social media for that. You choose the social medium that's right for you: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Pick your favorite quotes from the speaker, post photos, post screenshots, add your thoughts, and just remember, include our hashtag SWDays21. The second thing we want you to do actually, is to join the discussion with us. And that's why we integrated Slido, and we will be using it at all times. Is that right, Iris?
Correct. You can use Slido to ask questions or participate in polls throughout the whole conference. Now, to make things easier for you, we integrated Slido straight into your browser window, so you should be able to see it on your right-hand side on the screen. And now, just to check if you all have become digital natives throughout the past year, we are taking you on a quick Slido test run. You should be seeing a poll in the Slido frame now. Let us know your opinion on the following questions. Which technological trend will have the greatest impact on our industry over the next year? You can already start your vote, ladies and gentlemen, while I read the answers out loud. Is it the artificial intelligence? Is it 5G? Is it machine vision or high-performance computing? Cloud technologies, everything as a service, self-sovereign identity, or Internet of Things? Place your vote, ladies and gentlemen.
let your answers flow, and while we wait for you to vote for your favorite topics, here's a sneak peek of the keynotes that are coming right up. We are really honored to having these distinguished experts today here with us. We hope you enjoy them. Can we have the slide with the keynote speakers, please? This is the opening, the seven distinguished, not extinguished yet, thank God, 7 distinguished experts from 7 organizations very well known all around the world. And by the way, while you vote, have you checked the topics for our workshops tomorrow? For the ones who did, you know what I'm talking about. The answers in the poll have something to do with our workshops tomorrow. For the ones who did not yet, here's your chance. Look at the agenda for the next 2 days, and we have a packed program with more than 25 workshops, a pitching battle, further keynotes, a really packed program. But let's see. It seems to me that you have already made your minds. What are the main answers that we have on Slido? What are your main favorites? Well, artificial intelligence is definitely be one of the trends that will have the greatest impact in our industry over the next years. You can still join the dialogue. You see how easy it is to participate in the polls. During the keynotes, the only difference is that you will be able to type there your questions or vote for the most popular questions. And after the keynotes, we will be asking the most pressing questions to our keynote speakers.
And now it's time for our first keynote speaker from our host city of Vienna. Clemens Himpele is the Chief Information Officer of the city of Vienna. After having graduated from the University of Cologne in Germany in 2005, he started his professional career as an educational researcher in Cologne and Berlin. After this, his professional path led him to Statistics Austria in Vienna, then back to Frankfurt and back again to Vienna in 2012. It seems like the city of Vienna does its magic on you, Mr. Himpele. You're joining us remotely today. I can already see you. Can you hear me? We cannot hear you yet. Are you unmuted? I can see that your sign is unmuted. You have to get your microphone back on, please. It's not working? Let's try again. Can our technical staff help us maybe, please? Bitte Audioquelle noch checken. Please check your audio. Interesting. This is usually why we practice up front and then you're on air.
Yeah.
There you go. There you are.
Okay.
Warm welcome, Mr. Himpele. Great to hear you. I yield the floor to you for the next 15 minutes. And you, ladies and gentlemen, remember to use Slido. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's the same with the video conference tools. Every time you change the system. So thank you very much for the invitation. Of course, it would be much nicer having you in Vienna. We have a bright and sunny day today. But due to the pandemic, it is again an online meeting, and I'm very happy that you organized it that way. I'm not sure if a lot of you have been to Vienna before, so I would like to give you some key facts of the city at the beginning. Vienna is a growing metropolis in the center of Europe. We have a bit more than 1.9 million inhabitants and are the city with the 5th most inhabitants within the European Union. Vienna was named the most livable city in the world since a decade by the Mercer ranking, and since a couple of years also by the Economist Intelligence Unit. According to Roland Berger, Vienna tops also the list of smart cities. Within the city borders of Vienna, you can find 23 universities and University of Applied Sciences. So Vienna is home to almost 200,000 students. And I heard before that the topic of well-qualified labor force was also mentioned from one of the speakers. Of course, Vienna is known for its cultural life, the imperial heritage, the music, and maybe the wine. You may know that the city of Vienna owns a vineyard within the city borders. And most of you may know Johann Strauss. But Vienna is also a very innovative city. More than that, we have a history in innovation. I can give you just one example. We have a long history in innovation in medicines. Ignaz Semmelweis was the first person who understood the importance of hygienic measurements within hospitals, which became very popular due to the pandemic in the last years. Since around 15 months, everybody is keen to wash their hands in a proper way. And the understanding of hand washing was founded in Vienna. The maybe most popular son of Vienna works also in the wider field of medicine, Sigmund Freud. But up to today, Vienna is an important place for startups, established companies and research in the field of medicine and biotechnology. This topic is also one of the 6 main strategic goals in the Viennese economical and innovation strategy. A second one is the Viennese way of digitization. That's what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes. The most important point is that the technological progress, of course, is the basic of our wealth. But it is also very important to understand that technological progress is not neutral. It changes our all-day life as well as our working life. With the pandemic, we learned again how different the impact of the use of digital tools can be. Homeschooling and home office is not the same if you live with your partner or alone in a large flat, let's say with a balcony or a garden, or if you live with your family and let's say 3 kids in a small flat. Just try to work at home if you have to teach school at home at the same time. And by the way, there is a lot of jobs which are not suitable for home office at all. But of course, the used technology is the same. It's always video conferencing. So what we can see is that the technology is not neutral. And what we also see with the pandemic is that the use of digital tools became much more popular than it was before. Even persons who did not use those tools in the past were forced to use them now. For example, if they like to video communicate with their family or to participate in a web conference like this one or an online meeting. It will be part of the debate in the coming years how we will use these technological tools in a good way. But anyway, there is a political or societal dimension of digitization. It has a social, political and democratic dimension, as I mentioned before. It has, of course, an ethical dimension. Just think about the debate on artificial intelligence and the decision made by computers or the engineers who coded the algorithm. And as I saw before, artificial intelligence is one of the topics where we have a lot of participants who are working in this field of technology. And digitization has a dimension on gender equality. You can see that the role models have changed back during the pandemic. This means we need a framework for a proper use of the digital tools. That is what is meant by digital humanism in the coalition agreement of the new Labour Liberal government of the city of Vienna. The big debate on a good framework of the digitalization has also started within the European Union. The European Commission published 2 documents which will re-regulate the digital economy within the European Union. We will see how the debate will go and what regulation will be adopted at the end. I'm talking about the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. Both try to institutionalize the e-commerce sector within Europe. Both the debate in the European Union and the mentioned coalition agreement in Vienna has in common the idea that the people are at the center of the digitalization. Digitalization is not an end in itself, but should serve people. There are several further topics, like that all age groups must have access to digital tools. That is not what we see today in the statistics. Young people use the digital tools much more often than elderly people. But it is a clear goal it must be a clear goal that there should be no digital divide. As a public body, to us it's totally clear that there must be also a right to analog and telephone contact with authorities. If you need a new passport, for instance, you can and will not be forced to use online tools. But at the end, we want to have the high quality of living, not only in our analog world, but also in the digital one. How do I define the high quality of living from a city administration perspective? Well, I would say the city of Vienna makes it quite easy to me to organize my all-day life. If I need to travel from A to B within the city borders, I have a great public transportation system. If I have children and want to work, I have kindergarten opening hours, which makes a full-time job possible for both parents. If I want to see some green, I have accessible parks within the city borders and so on. And now we want to use digital tools to make the organization of the all-day life even more easy than it is today. The umbrella tool for that is Mein Wien, which can be translated as My Vienna. At this part of the Wien RT web page, you can find all digital rates and digital requests with the city administration. You can apply for a parking permit, request for a public garden, request for operating facility for catering, request for a construction submission, request for a temporary non-stopping zone. You can order repair vouchers and so on. This is the single point where you can find all these processes with the city administration. Some of them need an authentication via the mobile device signature, but some of them you can use even without that. Part of these requests are fully digitalized by now. Parts will be digitalized within the next years. One of our current projects running is the digital construction submission. These new services have save submitters time, money, and effort. In the end, it's the first step towards a completely online construction procedure. I can name some more projects. For example, 5G technology in Vienna. There is a funding program for faster 5G rollout within the city borders. And we had a 5G use case challenge with 4 winners. Let me just name one of them, which is a telemedical wound care technology for mobile care in Vienna, which was founded by the company Scarlet Red. In the before mentioned coalition agreement, you can also find the aim to build a digital twin of the city of Vienna. This is a planning and simulation instrument. The core is a geo-digital twin, but it has to be completed by social demographic information as well as travel information and so on. In the end, there will be more information on planning and improving the city. Let me come back to the city of Vienna. Vienna counts to the top places for ICT, for example, in artificial intelligence, embedded system, visualization, and IT security. Vienna is, of course, the IT center of Austria with 6,500 companies. They have around 60,000 employees by the year 2018. Of course, the topic of qualified workforce is also one in Vienna. But as mentioned before, we have 23 universities and universities of applied sciences within the city borders. Also, the city of Vienna invests a lot in the qualification of employees. We have an own institution for that called Wiener Arbeitnehmerförderungsfonds. In the European Digital City Index, the data are from the year 2016. Vienna owns the 10th place out of 60 European cities. Within the category lifestyle, Vienna is at the first place. Access to capital, Vienna has the 8th place, and in the category knowledge spillover, Vienna has the 8th place as well. Vienna is often well known at international level. For instance, the Digital Agenda Vienna won the prize for the most digital city from a German foundation. In 2019, the city of Vienna won the IDEA Award with its WienBot, artificial intelligence-driven bot of the city of Vienna. We used that bot also to help the population to understand what's going on with the coronavirus. To sum it up, Vienna is the most livable city in the world. This is good for people living in Vienna, but it's also good for companies, because if they need to hire around the world, it might be a good argument to come to the city with the highest quality of living. But Vienna is also an innovative city with a clear strategy. One focus is on digitalization. Besides that, Vienna has the social and ethical dimensions of the digital transformation clear in its view. It is in the DNA of the city to put the people in the center and to make clear that the tools of the digital transformation have one aim: to make the life of the people in Vienna even better than it is today. I wish you a very fruitful conference and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Himpele. This is really a great way to welcome everyone in Vienna joining us from all over the world today and to give us a really interesting overview of the digital dimensions, the different digital dimensions. And me personally, living in Vienna, I'm really happy to be living in the city with the highest quality of life. And I'm really looking forward, as you mentioned, actually to be living in the city of the highest quality digital life, possibly in the next years. I will ask you a few questions that have arrived from our audience through the Slido poll right away, and I'm checking our lists. And I see that our dress rehearsal earlier with the Slido worked. So we have some questions for you. The first question. You mentioned that Vienna, the city of Vienna, has access and provides access to real-time information about different services like traffic. The question reads, does Vienna often offer an open data portal that developers can access and use this kind of information?
Yes, Vienna has an open government data strategy, and we started with it in the year 2011, which means we have the 10th anniversary this year, and we will celebrate it later this year. And there is a portal where there's a lot of data. I think it's more than 500 different data sets at the OGD portal of the city of Vienna, and it will become more and more every quarter.
This is really, really fascinating. I think the call on developers who are listening to us here today is quite clear. Check the open data portal of the city of Vienna and see what you can do with all this information which are readily available for you. You also mentioned some of very exciting support initiatives for businesses. And since our event is all about digital business, I see a concrete answer. How the city of Vienna helps small businesses, innovators, developers to scale their software here in Vienna and to scale their businesses in Vienna?
Well, I think the best place to ask that is the business agency of Vienna. They are really the place to be if you want to start a business in Vienna or to scale up. What we can do as a city administration, of course, we have a team within the department in charge for the digital topics of the city of Vienna, the PACE team. They are in contact with startups and so on to check if there are some technologies we can use. But if you really need help with starting a business or scaling up, I think the business agency is the right place and the right address.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Himpele. Last question. Could you please mention again the award-winning project of telemedical service for mobile care?
It is by the company Scarlet Red, and it detects. It's a dermatological tool, and I mentioned it because it was a 5G use case challenge. And often you have a use case challenge, and after the use case challenge, nothing happens. In this case, there is a pilot project in some elderly care facilities right now, and that's very interesting. So it might be that we really can use it, and this would be really an improvement and really the sense of a use case challenge. That's why I mentioned it.
Use case challenges. This is really an exciting way to support actually businesses. And this 5G challenge is showing practically the hands-on support that the city of Vienna is providing to the developers or to the entrepreneurs out there that want to use it. 5G is also an important topic for us in this conference. And tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we have workshops and other suggested use cases for 5G technologies. I'm really glad that the city of Vienna is pioneering on that with use cases. Do you have some other use cases coming up in the next months that you could mention right now, or is it still secret?
Well, at the moment, we have a lot to do with the pandemic still. What you can see behind me here is the architecture, the IT architecture of the fighting the pandemic in Vienna. And that costs a lot of time. So no, I cannot announce it yet. Yeah, but of course, the topic of a use case challenge, as you mentioned, is a way to understand what's out in the market, what ideas do startups or other companies have, and are they usable to a city administration? That's why we did it. And as I mentioned, it was really a good experience. It was short before the pandemic started, so we have a little bit of delay in some of the projects due to the pandemic, but hopefully we can start again in a few weeks' time.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Himpele. Unfortunately, our time is up, but this is my turn to thank you again for your inspiring keynote, and welcome to the city of Vienna, to the digital future of the city of Vienna. And maybe you want to stay online and listen to our second esteemed expert this morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Himpele, from my side.
Thank you for the invitation, and have a good conference.
Thank you.
Our second keynote speaker this morning, ladies and gentlemen, is a senior scientist at the Technical University of Vienna, being a graduate business economist from the New College in Durham in the UK, as well as an organizational psychologist from the University of Vienna. She works at the interface between technology, organization, and psychology. Her research covers the topic of organizational communication in the context of flexible working from an individual as well as from a work team perspective. Dr. Martina Hartner-Tiefenthaler made her way to the Brutkasten studios today, and she will dive with us into her studies on a topic more pressing than ever: new ways of working. What can we learn from the past for creating the future? Welcome, Dr. Hartner-Tiefenthaler. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. All over the globe, people had to move into the home office, actually often without preparation. In Austria, 40% of all employees worked in the home office last year. Looking at the ICT sector, 95% of the organization offered home office to the employees. So the question is now what organizations are having, what to do next, what to do when the immediate threat of the pandemic is over. This is actually the purpose of my presentation today. I will present to you some research results from studies prior to COVID-19 in order to give you some indication how you can organize your work at your organization. And I will particularly highlight the role of leadership. But first, let's define new ways of working. New ways of working encompasses three aspects: flexi-time, flexi-place, and ICT, which means that employees can, to a certain extent, decide upon themselves when and where to work, which is enabled via ICT. And to be honest, the current situation is a little bit different to this flexibility, because currently many employees are kind of forced to work at home. They cannot decide whether they can go to the office and work there or work at home. This will be different again after the threat is over. Nonetheless, we have learned, and we are still learning, quite a lot of things. Work will be done out of sight, which means prior to COVID-19, there was this stereotypes that when people are working at the home, in the home office, that they are a bit slacking. These stereotypes are not so prevalent anymore. People are aware that home office workers are actually working. Also, we are now used to video conferencing all over the world. Sometimes people in different countries feel closer now, and people who are working in the office next door feel more far away than previously. So we've experienced the benefits, but also the limits of digital communication. Another point which is quite important and which is a big difference to prior to COVID-19, when you were working at home, you kind of missed out on social processes in the office. Usually you meet at the coffee corner, you chat about task non-related issues, you have lunch together, you know what your colleague is working on which project. These social processes within the office, they have decreased tremendously, and some social processes have been moved online. There is this virtual coffee breaks in many organizations, which is working quite nicely. We will see how the future will, what the future will bring, how these processes will change again once people are working in the office and at home more hybrid. So, but let's start with the study. I did an interview study from 2013 to 2015 in an Hungarian branch of a multinational organization, and they offered flexible working or new ways of working quite radically. So they, from one day to the other, they asked the employees to be flexible or allowed to be flexible, and then the employees only had to come to the office once a week in order to join the meetings. Previous to this change in 2013, the work was like people had to come to the office. This was a large room with many different desks, and if somebody had a question, the person stands up, asks the question in the room, and some other people would answer this question. So this also means that other people who are also working in the room are distracted, and also there's lots of mutual adjustments in the office, and also the meetings, they were kind of conducted rather inefficient because the start was often delayed. After the change, people only went to the office once a week. They had meetings there. They were actually quite efficient now, the meetings, which required planning and structuring, but then they started on time and were much faster than previously, which also resulted in less distraction. However, on the downside, it resulted also to a lack of direct communication, lack of face-to-face contact. And if you do not know whom to address for which question, then there's a lot of uncertainty. You cannot stand up in the room anymore and ask the question and somebody will know the answer. There was a lot of effort to finding out whom to ask. And also the office days, they were spammed with meetings because the employees had one meeting after the other, and those trust-building activities, which are actually so relevant also for effectiveness, they were diminished. And the people actually, leaders and also employees, acknowledged that the loss of team activities actually, which they really missed out. So based on this interview study, but also based on a huge variety of different studies from the literature, I would like to give you some key indications with regards to opportunities and threats for employees and employers. With regard to the opportunities for the employees, you can really say that once people are allowed to decide upon their own where and when to work, they are more satisfied with their job, they are more motivated, and it's easier for them to kind of balance work demands and private demands. However, on the other hand, we also found some empirical evidence that there is a work intensification. The boundary between work and non-work is less clear. People work longer because they need to finish up a project or so. People feel socially isolated at home. And also, this requires a lot of self-regulation. If you are free to decide when to start, you need to motivate yourself to start. For the employers, it means when they offer new ways of working, it means that they are seen as an attractive employer. And I think this will be even more important after the pandemic situation. Also, there is evidence that the fluctuation in the organization is lower, and there is the potential to save some costs with regard to infrastructure. However, also on the downside, there is some threats. The most pressing threat is data and IT security. And I'm sure there is plenty of expert on this topic here in this conference. My expertise is more with regard to organization, managerial control, and team coordination needs to be adapted. Once you allow your employees to decide when and where to work to a certain extent. What is very crucial here and must not be forgotten is the role of leadership, actually, because leaders do shape employees' beliefs, and there needs to be clarity how new ways of working are conducted at the organization. So first of all, the leader has a gatekeeper function. He needs to allow who has access to flexi-time or flexi-place. He needs to be sure how to signal performance and communicate how communication should take place in the team. And also with regards to availability, there needs to be some clarity, actually, because what we found out in an interview study is also that when you ask the employees with regards to availability expectations, they think they are much more expected to be available also outside work than the leaders. So be sure to be clear on that if you're a leader. Furthermore, with regards to taking responsibility of the social cohesion, in the interview study I presented to you, it was kind of everybody was saying, okay, it's not good, but everybody kind of thought the other side should take the responsibility for building the ground to foster relations. And third, as a leader, you must not forget that you're a role model and you are observed by your team members and certainly also copied to a certain extent. So now the question is how to prepare for after COVID-19. And certainly the technical infrastructure must be adequate, that's a must-have. And the leaders need some preparation since the social processes will change again. You must not forget that now there is this external threat somewhere. This COVID pandemic is an external threat, and what we know from social psychology is if there is an external threat, the social group will come closer together. But once the external threat is gone, things will change again. And it's important to clarify expectations and shaping routines which do need attention and also energy. And new ways of working should build upon autonomy. And autonomy means that you are kind of flexible to decide where and when to work. And this also means that it should also be possible for those who want to work standard hours at the office. So from 9 to 5 at the office needs to be possible also in new ways of working scenarios. What's also discussed in many organizations is the future of the organizational space. Because once you work 2 days a week at home and your colleague also, you do not see each other much and you actually could theoretically also use maybe a desk together. And there is some predictions with regard to organizational space, and the predictions are that the office might become more a place of connecting people, requiring meeting facilities, and for concentrated work, people rather use the home office. So this would also mean that maybe large rooms with many desks are less common and shared desks might be more common. But what does this mean for the employee? This actually means that the employee loses the designated workspace. Nowadays, you have a desk, then you bring your books, your pictures, and you can leave some material on the desk and work on it the next day. If you kind of have shared desk, the future will be different. Employees need to kind of pack up their stuff after the workday, put it in a locker in order to have the desk clean, so another person can work on it the next day. According to this topic, we actually are currently conducting a little study because we know that loss usually weighs heavier than gain. And even though the gain of finding kind of receiving the opportunity to work flexibly from home, our question is, can this be balanced out by the gain to work at home remotely. Because what we also know, there is a lot of psychological ownership attached to a desk, and if you lose this designated work desk, this might make something with people. So we did ask in a study, actually, in a survey, we did kind of introduce a scenario to people who lost their designated workspace. The only difference between both people was that one person A, was already experienced in remote work from home, and person B now newly received this opportunity. And we did ask who is unhappier, so where is the loss bigger? And the answer was of employees who like to work in home office afterwards that there is no difference between the two. And rationally, to be honest, there is no difference. And 17% said person A is unhappier, but 42% said person B is unhappier because the loss is bigger, because this person loses her desk or his desk 5 days a week. Unfortunately, I do not have time to dig into this more deeper, but I would like to kind of raise your awareness again with regard to the changes which lie ahead in order to shape the new normal ways of working. Once the pandemic is settled, once the threat is more settled, and once there is more stability outside throughout the world, there might be more uncertainty in the teams again, because the social processes, they need to be re-established. It needs to be negotiated how much home office is possible. Many organizations are preparing themselves already for refining their organization and policies, and the leader here is really crucial to interpret these policies and also to clarify the expectations and shaping routines of flexibly working together. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all the best for shaping the new normal ways of working in your organization.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hartner-Tiefenthaler, for these insights. Spot on, and the timing is perfect, really, because I think most of our participants today are preparing themselves to getting back to the office and are thinking how these flexible workspaces and working conditions might be like. May I abuse my role as a moderator and maybe ask you something, because I'm sure that many of our participants today at the conference are looking like this person amongst cables in a small desk. How do you see the future of events? Do you think that maybe in the future we will be able to host again people on a large venue and collaborate and network with them?
Yes, I do think so. I'm positive about it, but I think the future kind of should be not going back how it used to be. I think we can now kind of take the best of the two worlds, actually, and have some hybrid scenarios. I know from universities who have a lot of students coming in from other countries who have these visa regulations, and sometimes it's hard to travel, and for them it's now possible to study here, even without any troubles of visa. But nonetheless, I think this direct exchange, they are different. And I think many people agree on that and experience that. And I always hear people telling me, oh, I'm so happy to go back to the office and seeing the people in person.
Let me ask you, great, thank you very much for this answer. Let's go to our audience. And the first question, the most popular question is, how is remote work going to change mobility in a city and beyond in the long run? Do you see any implications there?
I mean, certainly kind of the mobility. I'm not a mobility researcher, to be honest, so I can just guess. I think it's more, if you have this autonomy and flexibility on an individual level, you will decide, is it worth it going there or not? What is kind of the benefit of it? It can be to talk with a peer about some things. So yes, maybe, but with regard to, I think in the end, it will change. And it will change, but if it's less, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, we're going to see about that. Another question, and that's more related to your experience. What organization know-how sharing methods would you recommend for remote-first companies? How can companies really share their know-how with their employees without getting it lost in the overwhelming ocean of digital tools out there?
Yes, actually, I think there's lots of different, really cool tools, but I think the most important thing is that people know how to use those tools, actually. If you have the best tool, really smart and many little gadgets on it, and people do not know how to use it, it will be useless. So really talk to your people and do not kind of use too much things. If you wait on this channel and you get the message on the other channel, you might not read the message nonetheless.
Very, very interesting. Last question, looking at the time. I think I know the answer, maybe from your presentation, but I will ask the question in either case. Do you think there's an ideal percentage of remote working? Is it 30%, 50%?
Actually, thank you for asking this question. There is a very recent study on that, and what we can see that the people, 17% doesn't want to work in home office in the future. The majority wants to work 1 to 2 days, and also a considerable share wants to work 3 to 4 days, and only a really minor percentage wants to work full-time at home. And with regard to employers, they want a little bit less, but they are also very happy to offer home office to their employees.
Very, very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hartner-Tiefenthaler, our time is up. But I would like to thank you again for being here with us today and for sharing your research outcomes, your time, your expertise with us here this morning. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I was in school, yes, indeed, it's been a while, my physics teacher kept quoting one very well-known scientist with the following words. A scientific hypothesis has to be falsified. So, if you're a scientist, and however many confirming instances there are for a theory, it only takes one counter-observation to falsify it. And only then you can call yourself a scientist. I'm sure my generation knows who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Sir Karl Popper with his famous theory of falsification. And our next keynote speaker shares his name, but to the best of my knowledge is not related. I am convinced, however, that the current students of Austria and all of our population got to know Nicky Popper far better than his name colleague. His science is researching simulations of complex dynamic systems, and his popularity in Austria has been growing daily since 2020, when his corona simulations went viral. Nicky Popper made his way today to the studio as well. And before I yield the floor to our next keynote speaker, I can ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to use Slido again for your questions. And I welcome Nicky Popper, who is already in the studio with us on stage, and he's just getting all set up and getting the ticker for his presentation. A warm welcome. Hello. It's a pleasure to meet you in person. I've seen you on TV so many times.
Thank you for the invitation. I have to.
This is your camera.
I'm not so used that so many persons are here.
Don't you worry. This is your camera.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, hello. Thank you for the invitation. And maybe I want to answer the question with the mobility you asked, because it's one aspect we are also using in our models, of course. So I will tell about COVID-19 simulations and decision-making in general. So what are we doing? So the population is in the center of everything. The population is the most important thing, and we have a virtual Austria. And as you can see, we can see where people are living, but we want to go into more detail. So we want to have a closer look. And of course, as we are in Vienna, we focus on Vienna. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to make a virtual Austria. And of course, for COVID-19, we needed a model that is able to simulate the interaction between persons. So we started 10 years ago to develop this virtual population. And as you mentioned, I'm a mathematician and computer scientist, so I have to make a little lecture, of course, now, to be a little bit annoying to all of our listeners, but I will make it very short and very quick. So what is the idea? The idea is to have a virtual Austria. population model. So it is programmed in the last 10 years with different modules. So to keep it very simple, we have on the first hand the population module, as I mentioned, and this contains of statistical representatives of all of us. So it's not us, it's only the statistical representatives. So of course it's according to the data protection regulations and so on. But what we are doing is we have persons with a given age with different features like what is their social status, what is their health status, do they have a dog or do they have a cat, for example. And of course we have the interaction with the environment. So people can interact with the environment, for example with hospitals or physicians or energy stations or whatever. And they have a pathway how they live their life. So normally we can model this from the birth to the death. At the moment we are modeling only a few weeks, a month. And as I showed you at the beginning, we have a residence sampling algorithm. So we know statistically where people live in Austria, based also on data. So we have all these features for our population, and that's this virtual population module for Austria. Of course, in the case of COVID-19, you need the contact module. You have to know where have persons contact with other persons. And as we heard in the last keynote, mobility is a very important thing because home office changes this, for example. So we have the possibility to have the households, the schools, and, as we've heard, the workplaces. So in our virtual population model, we also have the workplaces, and we can define, okay, where are people going to, and how did it change in COVID-19 because of the measures we had. So for example, if you have this contact network, you can close, for example, one workplace in blue, and then people stay at home and they have other contacts. They have not no contacts, but they have other contacts. So to make it very fast, as I promised, the disease module, of course, is very important. We all have learned that, for example, depending on the age, we have the different probability for the outcome of the illness. We have different working from the vaccinations and so on. And the last thing, what we have learned in the last month, which was the most annoying thing, was, of course, the measures. So we have policies. If we have here now the computation of the curve of the epidemics, we have all the measures with the lockdowns and all these things which were said. And of course, we have also to be able to implement it into our model. So it was, as I promised, very quick, very fast, different modules, virtual Austrian population, and now is the question, what can we do with these things? For example, we can integrate a lot of different data. Again, we have here the map of Vienna from our simulation model. And if I have a look now, that was the mobility of persons based on their mobile phones when it was the lockdown. And this was the mobility before the lockdown. You can better see it here. Here, so on the left upper corner, you have it before all the mess with COVID-19. On the left lower corner, you saw it in the first lockdown. And on the right-hand side, you can see that the difference wasn't that big, for example, in fall of 2020. That is one reason why the lockdown wasn't that working so much as in spring. One of the most important things from a software development aspect is that we are able to integrate very quick a lot of different data. You can see some examples here on the left side. Just recently we started to integrate the vaccination records from the Austrian population. And so it's very important for such tools to be very flexible. That's why we use these modules. And also to be able to implement very quick a lot of different data sets. What are we using it for? Of course, we use it to help decision makers. So in the early phase, you might remember this worst case scenario and this flatten the curve approach, where a lot of research groups try to point out what is the benefit if we reduce social contacts. And we started pretty soon to implement models and to describe how is this working. So if you see here this video, this was computed end of February when we started in Innsbruck. And this was the computation of February 2020. And what you can see, of course, the numbers are not correct because we don't have a glass sphere. But you can see the dynamic was quite as it was later. We have these waves, and they are reducing, and then we have again a wave, and they are reducing, and the timeline is about 400 to 500 days. So people were very annoyed those days when we showed this simulation with 400 or 500 days. And we very quickly used it in this early phase to help decision makers to make their decisions. Why? Because for the short time we have the possibility to make predictions, and on the long time run we are able to show the decision makers and the people why are people working like this. We can show how feedback loops work. We can show how causalities are implemented. And so always the goal is to make it from the possible scenario on the left-hand side to the scenario on the right-hand side. So to minimize, for example, the persons who are in the hospital, to minimize the usage of hospitals. And as I mentioned, we started then already in March, together with other colleagues from Medical University and Gesundheit Österreich, to make the short-time prognosis. So still, we are working for the so-called Ampel Commission here in Austria and give them to them and to the Minister of Health our actual prognosis every week to help to make the decisions. But what is the main goal of such complicated models? The main goal is, beside the prediction for a short time, to understand how our complex socio-technical world is working. And so in the meantime, after 1 year, we have a lot of different dynamics interacting. We have the measures, we have the screening programs, we have vaccinations, we have treatments, we have the natural immunization, and for God's sake, we have now, for example, the seasonality. What does it mean? The number of cases increase only by the rise of the temperatures and by different social interactions in summer. So what we started in the last year was then to support decision makers by analyzing these different dynamic part systems. And I only give you a few very simple examples. First example is vaccination. In October 2020, we computed for the Austrian official board for the vaccination program the question, how does the vaccination work if it is, for example, decreasing the spread of the illness, and if it's not decreasing the spread of the illness, if it's only decreasing the number of hospitalizations. And these were the results, and they were used also by the government to say, okay, it's a good idea to start with persons who have more probability to get sick very hard. So the prioritization was set on the older persons and the vulnerable persons to be vaccinated first. And what is interesting now, of course, we adapted our model, and as I mentioned, we are now able to integrate the data from vaccinations. So we have every day the possibility to integrate the vaccination data. And what we can now see is that we will start in June, that in green, the decrease of the dynamic of the epidemic, the so-called R effective, you know this probably from the media, will start to work by the vaccination. So this green line is the decrease, how hard hits us COVID-19. And you know, you can see, okay, in the first month it was only a little, and in June it will start really good. So in June it's a really good thing that we have the effect of vaccination. And in the upper graphic you can see the impact of the vaccination. So this black line, you can see, so at the end of June we have probably about 40 persons really to be secure just because of the vaccination. So that are things that we can try to model in our virtual Austria population. Another thing, to give you an example, is the total immunization status. A lot of people think, okay, vaccination is only working, but if we want or not, it was, of course, we had a high death toll. But for example, at the beginning of April, we had already nearly 20% of the Austrians immunized by an already finished illness. So that's also a very important thing, to include such things in our model. And of course, we can use this also to predict, in this case until end of June, how many persons will be immunized in total. And this is about 2/3 of the Austrian population. So good news, and important to know in advance to adapt the strategy. I think another success where our model was also used and could contribute was the question of screenings. We started already in April 2020 to show, okay, testing, tracing, isolation is work. And without going into detail, you can see here a basic scenario. It's not a prediction, it's just a scenario. But you can see, compared to the red line, what does screenings in households working on. And what was very interesting in this case was we not only looked at the screening itself, but we said, okay, let's have a look on the question, is it more efficient to screen in school households? And it is. So you can see the decrease of the school households is much higher than the screening in the same amount of normal households. Why is it like this? It's like this because school households have more persons in the households and they have more contacts in our contact network and in reality. So it's a very interesting thing. You can show the decision maker, if you make screenings, it's good to start with schools because you get there the most persons. And that, for example, also contributed to the question, can we do, or is it efficient to make school screenings here in Austria? Only examples where you can use it. For me, one very important thing is we use our model not only for our models, but we also producing synthetic data source for other research groups. So what you can see here, for example, are synthetic clusters, like they are modeled in our simulation. And we can contribute this data to other research groups or to other companies to use them. Why? Because they are also very safe on the data regulation governance, because they are synthetic data. So you cannot recompute real world data, real persons data from this. So to finalize, what are actual and future possible applications? So I think one important thing is we can use this tool, which was developed at TU Wien and the WH GmbH, also for other countries. For example, we used it, for example, for the readmission in psychiatric hospitals. It's a very important thing because it's a very important thing. How does people live? Can they stay at home, for example? And what I showed you here is just one process from a software point of view. The question, how can we join data from 6 different countries? So it was Norway, it was Finland, it was a part of Italy, it was Romania, it was Austria. And we were able also with this model to integrate a lot of data from different countries with different aggregation standards because also of data regulations. And we're able to use this model to help in a European project. One main goal is, of course, to support decision in health policy and planning. We found it with the funding of the City of Vienna and of the FFG DEXELB in 2014. And what I showed you to you is only one example, this virtual Austrian population, which we can use to model, for example, the whole health system and to make this the help to integrate data, to model with different tools from different providers, and to give decision support for social insurances, for the government, for private companies, or for the persons itself. So the question is always, what can we do and what scale are we working? So it might be interesting what you see on the right-hand side, on the upper right-hand side. We use the agent model to simulate NEVI, so it's Muttermale. I don't know how it is called in English. Thank you very much. So it's more or less the same technology, and we're working together with dermatologists to model this. Or on another scale, on the left-hand side, on the lower side, we use agents with the ABT, with the agent-based template. We developed the DWH GmbH for planning, for example, of hospitals, of airports, or of other infrastructural buildings, because the processes there are, of course, a big and important thing for climate change, for convenience for people, if processes like home office use is changing, and so on. So that was it one from my point. Of course, we need a lot of money. DWH GmbH is not only a company, but it's also a research incubator. And together with a lot of research groups, we are doing a lot of this research. And that's, I think, the most important thing, to always have the newest possible models with a real-time implementation where you really can use real-world data to make and to support the decision support for real decisions. And so you need, on the one hand, research projects, which are, for example, funded by the FFG or the City of Vienna. And on the other hand, you need, of course, the partners, the companies, the decision makers to know what is happening in the real world, because we are not doing models just for the research question or just for interesting things, but to help the future decision. So thank you very much, and I hope I can answer maybe one or two questions. I don't know if I was too long.
No, you were perfectly right on time. Thank you very much, Mr. Popper, for these fascinating insights on your work of research, on these simulations. Actually, also doing this kind of work amidst a pandemic puts you actually in a very weird position, in a thin red line between a fortune teller actually and a scientist. I think, and I see that from many of the questions that have been coming us from the public, and I guess it's not the first time that you hear this question. Do we see the last lockdown in Austria for now, for instance? Or can I get married in September?
No, I think we are on a pretty good way. Why? Because we have a lot of things some things are against us. So, for example, we don't know if there will be big mutations, but we have a lot of things who are with us. We have the vaccinations, we have at the moment the seasonality, we have still screening programs, but I think the most important thing, we cannot say the future. What we can answer is we have to stay with our strategy. We have to stay, for example, with screening programs because they are not so expensive. They are not so damaging our psychic situation, our economic situation. But we cannot say, okay, everything is over. That's, I think, the biggest danger.
But going further to fortune telling and telling the future, what was the biggest challenge adapting your simulations to the pandemic, to the corona systems?
I think my team and our team is really doing a big job because we have really new data every day. So it's not only data on the illnesses, it's not only resources from all over the world where we're discussing, for example, with the National Vaccination Gremium, where we say, okay, how is the vaccination working? Because that's the same over the world. But we have discussions and really good input, great input from the wastewater project team at Technical University, from teams who are measuring the vaccination numbers, from teams who are doing the tests. So really, and that's really a very, very interesting part. Beside all the weird things of COVID-19, we have now really a big cooperation between research groups, between companies, between funders. For example, the WWF funded very early a lot of projects where we, for example, were able to integrate the mobility data into our model. So that's the biggest challenge, but it's really a fascinating challenge.
Mm-hmm. Is this data public, and who has access to this data? How is it being ensured not to create any biases?
We are not ensured to create biases because we have biases. The best example is the number of positive cases. So we developed one module in our simulation is only to calculate the Dunkelziffer, so the not detected cases. And we compare this, for example, with other research groups, with Alexia Fürnkans-Preskavets at Technical University, with other research groups all over the world. The second question is, some data is public, and we try to work on the decision makers to make more data public, to make more transparent decisions. So it's a big discussion at the moment, and I think it's very important. At the moment, some data is free for some research groups. Of course, we have the issue of data privacy. So it's not able to give data from health systems to the public just so. But at least what we try to ask is that we have decisions where we can combine the data, for example, from all over Austria and from the different resources, and to make research groups able to say, okay, we want to do a research, we want to help in the decision support. How can we get in a formal and transparent way the access to this data? And think this will be one of the big issues in the rest of 2021. One example is that we need to know, and we also don't know it, who is vaccinated and who is positive tested. And we need, for example, these connections. Why? To monitor if we have reinfections of vaccinated persons. That's very important. So that's only one example. And we need more of this.
Wow, this is very interesting. And going beyond the Austrian level, did every EU state develop its own model? Is the next question. Could they develop their own models? Is there any European cooperation on models used in the other member states?
That's a very interesting question. It's also very fascinating, and I'm very, you see, I'm very. There are a lot of activities. So, for example, one activity is there is the European Forecast Hub, organized by a colleague from Germany who is working in England, and there are a lot of models, and they compute for 2 weeks what happens in Europe, and they are compared, and so they learn from each other, and. That's one interesting thing. And the second interesting thing, of course, we have a cooperation. So my colleagues have every Tuesday a meeting. So one group is doing the prognosis for the Ministry of Health on Tuesday. And another part of my team, every Tuesday is a meeting with all other modelers in Europe. And some of them also have agent-based models. Some have more classical models. And so we discuss it, we compare it. It's like a Selbsthilfegruppe. And we learn a lot from each other. And it's going on. And recently I had a discussion, for example, at Harvard School of Public Health, where we compared it, for example, with the South African, with the Brazilians, and with the United States model. So a lot is going on. And I think we will be able to really support decision makers and to really support the design of new processes for the 21st century with tools like this. They are not solving the problems, but they can help to get more insight into the question, how will it be? Only for a short time. But why are things be like what? So these feedbacks and this causal interaction. And so I think we can help a lot.
Great. Mr. Popper, I think our time is up. Thank you very much for joining us here in the podcasting studio today. But most of all, thank you for the great policy support you have been doing in the past months for Austria and for the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you have all proven to be very patient and very persistent. And therefore, we actually think that you all and we deserve a coffee break. This will be a 10-minute break. And after the break, we will continue with the topic, how to establish a trustworthy artificial intelligence B2B ecosystem. So stay tuned and off you go until 11:20. See you back on time. Welcome back, all refreshed and fit for more future. This is the beauty of live events. We gave you 5 minutes extra coffee break. And now, please glue back to your chairs, ladies and gentlemen, because we're moving from the simulation of complex dynamic systems to the topic mentioned before our coffee break, how to establish a trustworthy artificial intelligence B2B ecosystem. Our next speaker, her name is Ms. Clara Neppel. serves as the Senior Director of European Business Operations at the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE, I did practice that, where she's responsible for the growth of its operations and presence in Europe, focusing on the needs of industry, academia and government. She joined IEEE after many years with the European Patent Office and holds a PhD in computer science from the Technical University of Munich and a master in intellectual property law and management from the Université de Strasbourg. Ms. Clara Neppel is joining us today remotely from her office. I'm calling her now. Are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, back for you to Slido and Ms. Clara Neppel for the next quarter of an hour. The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction and also for the invitation. So, as mentioned, my presentation, and I think this is very relevant also as regards what we have heard before the coffee break. We need trust for the adoption of technology and also how people interact with the technology. We need trust in order for people to share their data if they are vaccinated and so on. So let's see how we can get there. But first of all, let me give you a very brief introduction of IEEE is, for those of you who don't know us. We're basically the largest technical organization in the world with more than 400,000 members worldwide. And since more than 5 years, we have now a headquarters in Vienna, and very happy to be there. Basically, what we are doing is convening people, technologists, to develop technology, but also to standardize. So probably a lot of you are using now one of our best known standards, the Wi-Fi standards, but we have also a lot of other standards in biotech and also other technologies. We're also a big publications entity and a lot of societies which range from electrical engineering, which is in our name, to blockchain, artificial intelligence and quantum. So let's go to artificial intelligence and see where we are now. Well, the good news is that we are in an AI summer. So looking at the number of peer-reviewed research publications, this is exploding in last years. And it is also getting better. It takes less time to train. For instance, here an ImageNet, image recognition classification system. It took more than 6 minutes to train 2 years ago or 3 years ago on a standard database, while it takes only 40-something seconds to train it now. So this is, of course, also due to the number of accelerators, special processors which are developed for machine learning and artificial intelligence, but it's also a boost towards innovation because, of course, a lot of new ideas come up of what we can do with artificial intelligence. And we also see an increased performance. So AI systems even surpass human performance in a lot of areas. For instance, in natural language processing, people don't even get to develop, let's say, metrics that the system cannot surpass in quite a short period of time. For instance, here you see 2 versions of a natural language processor. It took 24 months for the first version to surpass human performance that you see on the red line. And it took less than 10 months for the second version to surpass human performance, although the stakes were done higher. But since we are coming back from the coffee break, all of us, AI systems are, for instance, not so far to recognize activities such as drinking coffee from a video feed. So there are a lot of things that are still have to be developed. We heard about Vienna also adopting an initiative, namely digital humanism. And we from IEEE very much endorse this initiative because it is aligning with our vision of advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. So let's look a little bit and see what is the definition of humanist, just looking very quickly in a first sentence, which pops up in Wikipedia. So it is said there that humanist is a philosophical stance that emphasizes the potential and agency of human beings individually and socially. So it relates to the notion of human progress and human freedom. Now, if we look into digital and humanist, let's see what these terms actually mean. What are humans in the digital space? Well, this changed a lot in the last years. Just a few years ago, we were merely records. Some of the applications registered our name, birth date, address, and so on. Nowadays, very sophisticated profiles are being set up. And for instance, even if we take such technology as emotion recognition, affective computing, this is being developed right now. And just a few years ago, it was based only on one parameter, for instance, on the heart rate. Nowadays, with help of AI, we see a combination of verbal, visual, and physiological inputs that can be taken into account to set up profiles. And of course, this can have a lot of benefits, for instance, in precision medicine. But of course, it is also an imbalance of power, if you want, so of information as regards the system provider and the users, or also the public body and the public society as such, because maybe some of these information are needed to set up better public health measures. We can go even into more speculative realms and see that there are also some technologies proposed to synchronize our brains with AI, such as brain-computer interfaces. This is also something which, of course, a lot of people are made, let's say, unsecure about the future of the boundaries between humans and the computer. So let's see the other way around. What is digital in our space, in the human space? Until now, we are all sitting in front of our computers or our mobile phones. And unfortunately, I cannot be with you in Vienna, in the Vienna City Hall, maybe, to provide this presentation. But maybe this will change also in the future. There are some new technologies which emulate ourselves in remote locations without us being necessarily there physically. And we are getting there. Maybe there are some technologies which are still needed, such as instrumentation, full body instrumentation, or the development of photorealistic avatars. But this is changing as well. Say hello to Amelia and her peers. Their developers call them digital humans. Of course, you can argue about this terminology. But the fact is that their three-dimensional faces are actually modeled on human beings. They don't necessarily have to be existing human beings. And what is also more interesting is that entities can increasingly develop their own avatars with no coding experience at all. So that means not only can I beam myself into the Vienna City Hall maybe in the future, but I can choose one of my avatars and I can choose another avatar to be in another meeting. So what does this mean when we have a growing number of extended identities or even realities? Humans perceive or interpret their world through different lenses, which include culture, but also their environment. And these lenses are going to change significantly as we have more digital and maybe also extended augmented reality technologies which are entering our space. So what does it mean, coming back again to the definition of human, is the agency of human being individually and socially. And we are coming back to this notion of trust. And I think this is important for every ecosystem, but it is especially important in an ecosystem where you have autonomous and intelligent systems. Because this is not only among the business partners, but it is also increasingly challenged from top down, from the legislator, but of course also by the consumers who ask to be using trustworthy AI technologies. So what to do about it? Well, basically what we've seen in the last years is a proliferation of principles which have been set up by different organizations, such as the Commission, the European Commission, such as the OECD, also IEEE. And this is important because it is important to set up what are the rules according to which we want technology to govern our life in the futures. And you see here a lot of familiar things, such as human control of technology, fairness and non-discrimination, transparency and explainability, safety and security, and so on. But what is also more interesting is that we now see also redefinition of risk. Maybe some of you have read the new draft proposal of the European Commission, which is a risk-based approach. What is interesting that risk is redefined. It is not only relating to traditional risk notions such as safety and security, but it also includes risk as regards fundamental human rights. And it even defines in this pyramid something like an unacceptable risk, which relates, for instance, on social scoring systems. But I think what is also important is not only to redefine risk, but also to redefine the metrics of success. So to ask ourselves what counts in the algorithmic age. Very often until now, we were focusing on performance and of course also on profit. And this is important to continue to do this. But I think increasingly we have to put into these metrics also the other two P's, namely the planet and the people. And of course, it is very good that we started with the principles, but we cannot stop there. We need to see how we can implement those principles and how to put them into practice. And actually, the only way to do this is to convene the stakeholders and discuss with them how to implement them. This is what we were doing in IEEE now for some years. One of our initiatives is called Ethically Aligned Design, where we convene technologists such as us with philosophers, ethicists, doctors, and so on, and see what are the issues at stake and what are possible proposals to us as a technical society and developers, and to policymakers and a society at large. And basically, since we are a standard-setting organization, we developed 3 pillars through which we can make these principles practical. And these are 2 standards: certification and governance. Basically making explicit what is implicit, let's say, in the developing, when these systems are being developed. The standards are basically recipes, if you want so. What needs to be taken into account when we develop artificial intelligence systems which interact with business partners or with customers? How to take values into account? How to measure such abstract notions as transparency? It is a completely different issue of transparency for a user of a care robot, for instance, than somebody who is actually repairing that robot. And when it comes to standards, that's very good. But how can we actually verify if somebody is following these standards? So this is why we developed also a certification system, which for the moment has 3 dimensions, namely transparency, accountability, and algorithmic bias. We are also looking into privacy right now. And we actually have a proof of concept with the city of Vienna. And if you're interested to hear more about this proof of concept, you can come to our workshop tomorrow. Also at the B2B Software Days, we will present that proof of concept. And ultimately, what we need to put also in place is the governance, new governance structures, which are accountable and that have to put those standards, best practices, and certifications into practice, as well as developing the skills in order to make this ecosystem trustworthy. Basically, these are the main ingredients, and I would like to stress maybe that through these slides, it became clear, and coming back to digital humanism and the B2B ecosystem, that we are living in an interaction between the digital and the human space. And basically what is important is that in order to have all these benefits of this interaction, we also need to set the rules today on how we would like this technology to influence us, and to set up those principles first, then standards, best practices, labeling, if you want, so that you see so here on what we require from these technologies, and also then the necessary skills, and ultimately also legislation if we need so. I think that with these structures in place, we can indeed move towards a positive vision for humanities, for hopefully very inspiring realities that we will see in the future. Thank you.
Presentation. I hope really that your work in that field comes into our lives sooner than later, because we have all seen films of dystopian futures that we definitely would like to avoid. And building trustworthy AI ecosystems, be it B2B, B2C, or within the society itself, is one of the critical cornerstones of our future, and is definitely easier said than done. Let me start with one question that's related to our target group of today. It's mainly businesses. What do you think would be the main motives for a small to medium-sized enterprise or for a business to adopt one of these certification or standards on trustworthiness on AI? What would you recommend to them?
Thank you. So I think that what is important is that these businesses, they are all interact among each other. The outcome of one company will be the input of another company. So basically, if you want to, if there are certain rules for trustworthy outcomes, and you are basically relying on some systems that you are buying or that you are basing your inputs on, it is important that other entity in the ecosystem is also satisfying the same rules. Otherwise, it will not work. So for a small and medium-sized business, it is important to have those, as I said, explicit rules, because then they know from the onset how to develop the technology to satisfy this. So it's basically also, if you want to, reducing the development cost, because you don't have to operate in a big space of uncertainty, but you actually know what are the conditions that your product or service will have to satisfy.
And what alternative ways other than legislation or certificates do you use for discussing and executing standards?
Sorry, I didn't understand. What other ways?
You have the legislation, of course, yes, regulations, certificates, and standards that are driving this trustworthiness in the AI yes, ecosystems. On your work on these trustworthy ecosystems, what else could be done, or what other initiatives are you pursuing in IEEE for that reason? I think the question goes mainly into the governance sector that you mentioned, which is also very important to build awareness. But yeah, the floor is yours.
Sure. Basically, in IEEE, we are trying to cover all of this, just as you mentioned. So since we are a neutral technical association, and basically everyone can join. So if you're interested in any of these initiatives or new initiatives, we can offer the platform to develop that standard certification and so on. Of course, this has to be done also together with the regulatory environment. So for instance, just to give you now the example of the new EU AI draft regulation, of course, there's a lot of questions around how this will relate to the rest of the world. And one answer to this is actually standards, because through standards, you can actually export, if you want so, the regulation to other parts of the world. And it can take into account also different regulations. So standardization is basically involving stakeholders. That means the people who are developing it, the people who are using it, the people who are regulating it in different parts of the world.
And I think that in the European Union, we have definitely opened the discussion and we have some measures in place. What happens if the other countries, the other areas along the globe do not follow up with this? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so it's very often this is being put in on the same level as the GDPR. So the GDPR basically showed us that if you make a certain regulation in a certain part of the world which is relevant, such as the European Union, then the rest of the world will follow if they would want to put products and services on the market. Because would be also quite expensive to develop different versions of a software for different parts of the world. So actually, this is the only way that we can do about it. It has to be regulated somewhere where we think this is important. And in Europe, human values are important, luckily. And the rest of the world, if they want to put these products and services, they have to abide to follow these rules. And so it worked with the GDPR. Of course, there are things that we can improve. But it definitely changed the perception, for instance, on privacy, and now on different other things such as fairness and bias in the rest of the world as well.
The example is very good and very crystal clear, actually, to our audience. I think we'll see how it evolves and plays out. Last question for the tech community that is following us online. What is your advice that you could give to them in order to keep building trust and keep the awareness on the ethical uses of AI?
Well, basically, what I keep saying when I'm being asked this question is that it shouldn't be something which is related just to liability. You shouldn't do it because there's some regulation out there. Basically, if we are following a value-based design, or we take into account the needs of the customers, we're also building better products. And then it means that you also have a better value proposition, which it will ultimately be materialized also in bigger success on the market and so on. So engage with customers, engage with the stakeholders, and try to understand their needs, and build your services and products accordingly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neppel, for these fascinating insights. I think that the links are already here in the Slido window regarding the ethical certification system, because our audience asked for that. And I just would like to remind them to join the workshop tomorrow on the same topic. So thank you again, Dr. Neppel, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
And now, moving on to our next keynote speaker right away. Iris, over to you.
Before I introduce our next keynote speaker, we're also having a quick technical checkup in the meantime, because we're adding a device. Perfect. Thank you, Iraklis. Ladies and gentlemen, we all grew up listening to stories. And not only has storytelling seen a massive revival in the past years as an art, it has also become a very strong business sector. So our next keynote speaker is known as the Story Dude, a fire starter, instigator, troublemaker, and embolder. As a brand strategist and business coach, he helps brands, startups, small and medium-sized companies, international corporations, founders, and CEOs alike to find their story and to find sustainable ways to reach and stay in touch with their audiences beyond advertising. So last but not least, he's a successful entrepreneur, having found Gull & Company in 2007 and Gull & Gotham in 2013. These companies, both companies, focus on developing immersive communications for brands. As mentioned before, he's joining us live today with his equipment, and I'm very much looking forward to his keynote story. Welcome, Markus Gull. The stage is yours for the next 15 minutes.
Thank you, Iris. Welcome, everyone, for something completely different now. It's about stories beyond algorithms and data and Excel and codes and software. It's a little bit about philosophy. It's about story. Why do stories matter in the world of B2B software, for building companies, for brands, even personal brands? Everyone in the pitching battle already knows at this event or other occasions, it's about story first. That's the battle cry we hear over from Silicon Valley in the startup universe. Let's have now a close look beyond the storytelling hype and the buzzwords that are flying around. And as we are close to lunchtime, let's say good morning. Let's share a late breakfast. A breakfast that's actually served by Peter Drucker, who famously said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." I want to add something. Culture is strategy's superfood. Culture is strategy's operating system. And this culture derives from story. Story first. That's how we think as humans. That's how it's thinking inside of us. So how our story comes about. What do we talk about when we talk about story? And this one great book, maybe you'll know it, Homo Deus from Yuval Noah Harari, who is a great storyteller in his own rights, and I highly recommend to read his books. He put it in this book very, very good. Each of us has a sophisticated system that throws away most of our experiences, keeps only a few choice samples, mixes them up with bits from movies we've seen, with novels we've read, speeches we've heard, and daydreams we have savored. And out of all that jumble, it weaves a seemingly coherent story about who I am, where I came from, and where I'm going. This story tells me what to love, whom to hate, and what to do with myself. This story may even cause me to sacrifice my life, if that's what the plot requests. We all have our genre. Some people live a tragedy. Others inhabit a never-ending religious drama. Some approach life as if it were an action film, and not a few act as if in a comedy. But in the end, they are all just stories. Yuval Noah Harari. Perfectly put. So, what are we talking when we are talking about brands? The one story we tell ourselves since invention of brands, we tell brands are heroes. That's the one great story we tell about brands. The story is triggered by hero brands everybody knows. These wonderful examples like Apple or Nike or Red Bull. And that is what we want to have when we start out with our businesses, when we start out in life. We want to have this wonderful hero brand when we stand at the shore of the sea filled with endless opportunities, looking out for the perfect wave to surf on. These brands are our role models when we start out, hero brands. We want to surf this perfect wave. And when a business is started, there are mainly three reasons for starting a business. First are our skills. We are very good at something. Second is we love something. And if we love the same thing when we are good at, that's a good start from. There you can build a profession. And then there comes demand on top of that. Then we know what and how we want to make. That's how businesses are started. That's how we push our ideas out in the world. That's how we push our ideas to investors, to partners, to our staff. This is the well-known our story that serves us ever since. And this story tells us if we have more, we are better. The winner takes it all. The bigger the better, the faster the better. And all of a sudden, something strange happens. When these super surfboards, having more, having super success, are better than everyone, looks in a mirror one morning, the super surfboard is seeing something different. Something is lacking. And the vast majority of my clients is asking, can you help us with finding this one lacking thing? And this one lacking thing is made famous by Simon Sinek in several years. It's called the why. What, how, why? That's the golden circle of Simon Sinek. Because we need something that's bigger than our business. That's something that society demands. This is where our story comes from. And a lot of companies start exactly from this point. What does society demand? This is where social entrepreneurship comes from. Where do I find that? And why is that of paramount importance and crucial for building sustainable business, resilient businesses and brands? Let's borrow from Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky, the most famous hockey player of all time, who once said, a great hockey player is always where the puck is. And an excellent player is where the puck will be. We do have to understand where the puck will be, because in former days, we were talking about products and services and things like that, but it's not about products anymore. It's not about functions anymore. World's biggest car service doesn't own one single car. World's biggest media outlet has not one single journalist. World's biggest lodging service does not even own one pillowcase. It's not about products anymore. It's not about products anymore. It's about relations, and it's about meaning. And meaning is nothing abstract. It's where real business happens. Let's make an example. If you take €35 and go to a media, electronic devices company, you will get for €35 a perfect MP3 player. If you put €150 on top of that, you will get an iPod. And the €150 you paid for meaning. Meaning is where value and added value comes into existence, where distinction arises, when we build a relevant story. And that's the question, what's a relevant story? What's for a business a relevant story? And the good news is there's only one story. There's only one relevant story. This one story is intriguing for everyone, guaranteed. You have to know only one story for your business. And if I would go to the bookstore and see this book at the booksellers, I would buy it immediately, even without checking who has written it and from which year it is. And this one book is about the only one intriguing, interesting story. It's this one. It's the story about you. We are only interested in our own story. And John Steinbeck, the Nobel Prize winner, great writer, put it very well. If a story is not about the hero, he will not listen. And a great and interesting story is about everyone, or it will not last. So a brand story, a company story, can never be about the brand. Can never be about the brand. So when we look at the three main characters every story has, the hero and the mentor and the antagonist, we know perfectly well the brand can never be the hero. We have to change this old thinking, brands are heroes. We have to shift our perspective radically to brands make heroes. Brand isn't at the center. The company isn't at the center. The audience, the audiences are at the center. And the brands are the mentors. Mentors are here to enhance the status of the hero. This is the purpose of a mentor, helping others to reach the goal through expertise and empathy. Expertise and empathy. That's what a real mentor does need. A mentor, like we know, like Gandalf or Merlin or Obi-Wan Kenobi, who gives the hero something wonderful like Excalibur or the lightsaber or a great software, by the way. And it's the best you can do for your own well-being. Research and studies on happiness show that. And if you know the famous Abraham Maslow hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow himself changed that one in the 70s to put transcendence on top of it. And transcendence reach supporting others to reach their goals and self-actualization. So we know who is the hero. We know who is the mentor. The hero is our audience, the mentor are we, but who's the antagonist? Who is the villain in our story? Is this the competitors? It's the wrong question. Who is the mutual antagonist? The mutual antagonist of our audiences and of us. That's our story. That's where we are of value. That is what I, as audience member, want to share. That's what I want to write on my T-shirt. Because we don't buy what we need. No one buys what he needs. We buy what we want. We don't buy products, software, solutions, or something like that. We buy what we want to be. We found what we want to be. We fund what we want to be. And we all want to be part of something that's bigger than us and makes us a little bigger when we are part of that. We want to be part of purpose. And research shows meaningful brands, companies that have a meaning, a purpose, something bigger to share, a story to share, work business-wise better. They have 137 more KPI outcomes. They have a higher increase in the share of wallet, and they do better on the stock market. They outperform other brands on the stock market. So this is the best we can do, to have a close look, what's the business we are in. If we take the example of the New York Times, and I ask you in which business is the New York Times, you will say, yeah, it's news business, that's obvious. Well, that's wrong. They are in the truth business. The New York Times is in the truth business. Since in the time when Donald Trump was in office, they nearly tripled their online readers, and they nearly more than doubled their stock value, because this is the shared common vision, the shared common desire of the audiences and the brand. We have to have a close look in which business are we. And that's actually a news story we have to tell. It's a news story that tells about collaboration. It tells about support. And it turns the well-known USP every company needs into a USP every company needs. That reads like the unique selling proposition turns into a unifying sense-making purpose. This is the new USP every company needs, be it a digital company, be it a startup, be it a high-profile super company. And if you say, hey, I can't do anything alone, I'm a small business, what can I do alone? Then you are probably right. So what can one person change in this world? That's a difficult situation. What can one person change in this world? What can one single person change in this world? So if you are too small or too young or something, what can one person change in this world? So the truth is, never doubt that one thoughtful, committed person can change the world. It's the only thing that ever worked. And story is about how good we tell our stories, but in the first place, it's what we are talking about. And if we do this well, people share our story, and we get one precious thing from them back. It's time. It's time with brand. It's time with purpose. Or else, otherwise, we only have one story left we can talk about. And this is the price. And who wants to do that? Because there will be all the time someone who will do the same as you do, just a slightly cheaper and a slightly worse. So let's end this 15 minutes breakfast time with one famous quote of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who, as everyone knows, discovered America in 1492. And he said one great thing: rock and roll. Thanks for telling your stories in a better way, in a meaningful way to the audiences of yours.
Thank you very much, Markus. Wow, what a story. And you definitely rocked the stage, the virtual stage today, because our audience has been speechless. I don't see any questions. This means actually that they have been glued to your words from the beginning of this presentation. So I will have the opportunity to ask you some questions from my side. And I would also like to give somehow the aspect and the viewpoint of our SMEs, the audience that we are talking today with. Most of these companies that are following the stream today are really very good experts in their technical field. They design marvelous software, they have great businesses, but they are too focused on their products, on what they are doing, what they are programming. They can communicate that very good, but not their brand. So what would be the advice that you would give to them? How can they find their own story then and sell it?
Yeah. So the best way is to go back to the founder's dream. Why did you start your company, your software project, whatever, in the first place? What was this cultural tension you were addressing? And what is a perfect world? Develop a vision in a perfect world. How would a perfect world would look like? That's something you never will reach, because if you reach it, it isn't a vision, it's a goal. So develop your vision of a perfect world and then understand what's the best contribution you can do. You can bring into this field. Like New York Times. People are longing for truth. So the best we can do is helping everyone to find what's true out in this world of weird communications everyone knows. And that's the same with the software product. This wonderful golden circle from Simon Sinek, this why, this how, and this what. Everyone forgets that there is one thing connected to that. That's for whom and what for. Because this why is in the past. We have to look to the future. For whom and what for.
And I guess that this process takes sometimes longer. I see some questions popping up right now from the Slido. And one question is related very much to that. How can you measure whether you're really reaching your audience, your users, or your heroes? How can you then iterate based on these insights on efficiently designing or redesigning the product, the service, and incorporating the feedback from your heroes into your brand?
Yeah. So there are several ways. One process I love very much is open innovation. And open innovation is probably the best way in the high-tech world to get in touch with new solutions, with what audiences want, what the audiences are talking about. There is a lot of possibilities we call social listening. And then the best you can do marketing-wise, and everyone can do that, is to go into the field of content marketing, to put out useful information in the world and get in touch with your audiences via feedback, via comments, via how social media works. And then you can measure this wonderful thing you can get back that's called time with brand. The more people share your meta communications, the more time they spend with your meta communications, the more time with brand you get. And this tells you that's of value.
Thank you very much, Markus. I think social media is the key word also for you, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget tweets or posts on the social media under the hashtag SWDays21 and make our brand more successful. Thank you very much, Mr. Markus Guhl. Again, we will definitely contact you before the B2B Software Days 2023 for our brand again.
Looking forward to that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been taking notes. I'm sure you have been too. And our next keynote speaker now is a founding member of the Institute of Advanced Research in Artificial Intelligence. He says, and I quote, "We're driven by the principle of white boxing artificial intelligence. We're advancing basic and applied AI research, solving problems of high social impact. We go beyond urban traffic research, climate change, health, or well-being. All our research is open and published." He's a mathematical modeling specialist, bringing decades of expertise in risk assessment and advanced data analysis. In addition, he's also a data scientist at Here Technologies in Zurich. And that's where he's also joining us from, remotely from his office in Zurich. Dr. Michael Kopp, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. A warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
You're back to Slido, and Dr. Michael Kopp, the stage is yours for the next 15 minutes.
Thank you. Let me try and share my slides. Can you see them? Can you see my slides? Would that be, is that? Hello? Okay,
Yes, we can see your slides.
Fantastic. That's good. Okay, so just want to check. Well, I want to talk about something, actually a story, as our last speaker said, maybe not the main story, but actually a very important one that I believe all of us, developers, SMEs, also in the B2B section, should be aware of. And that is actually what's the impact of AI on the future of the development toolchain. So in this talk, I give a short introduction and hopefully convince you that you should care about this. I'll try and derive the consequences I see on 3 issues, and then I'll give a clarion call to all of us what we can do and how we can work together to solve this. So let me start with an introduction. I think I speak for everyone who's ever developed, that the dream would be you sit at your keyboard, or maybe even not a keyboard, but a voice device that kind of takes your thoughts. And then you would like to write very little code, throw it against a compute wall, and that compute wall will just do all the heavy lifting. It will scale your code. It will run it on mobile devices. It will figure out by itself how it should maybe add more processes, as we call them, to make this all work. And here at the bottom is a very bad twist of a quote from Christopher Marlowe's Faust. This is the phase that launched 1,000 processes. So that's the dream where we want to get to, really. And as of today, we're not there, but I would say we're much further than we were 10 years ago and definitely 20 years ago. So today they're the buzzwords CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous deployment, orchestration, infrastructure as code, that allows us to encode, do provisioning of actually the compute infrastructure, that allows us to package and maintain our code, that allows us to deploy nicely. And here I've put a few of the tools there, which are in a way, I mean, heavily used. They're definitely not all tools. And if I forgot your tool of choice, I apologize. So containers, container orchestration like Kubernetes, Terraform or Pulumi, where you encode, do part of the stuff that also the others do. Of course, on the cloud computing side, you now have serverless, the idea of serverless services that you can use. AWS, Google Cloud, and many others are providing those. So this, I would say, is my attempt to give a bit of an overview where we are today in this kind of dream. And the question I would like to address today is how will AI at scale affect this current tool chain? And spoiler alert, I believe, and that's also the reason why I'm even talking, that this will actually be a large impact. But the first thing maybe you might want to know is, why should you care? And I think the reason why you should care in a word is that the hope that AI technologies have had, and you see that in investment that go into self-driving cars, into new mobility services, into the ability to affect our smart city planning, and so on and so forth. You see the investments that go in, and that's also in part based on the hope that this technology brings, plus the results that are there. I've on this slide just put 3 things that I find very exciting. On the top left, you have from OpenAI a tool that actually generates images from text and can go the other way around, so can generate text from images. It essentially tries to find a common feature space between the two. And what you see there is what this tool spits out if you say a chair like an avocado. Yeah. I put it the wrong way around. It should be a chair like an avocado. At the bottom left, you have segmentation of images, very important for self-driving cars. And actually on the right, this is a representation of what's happening in reinforcement learning, so that you have the ability of reducing extremely complex control theory problems, which in the past we would have said are pretty undoable, to actually writing a proper environment or a simulator, if you like, a game for it. And then the AI will in that game play it many, many, many times with a lot of compute power and will find a solution itself. So advances there was the Go player a few years back, but that's also the technology underlying the hope in self-driving. So let me tell you why I think there are a few issues. So these are all connected with the characteristics that actually neural networks, which are the workhorse of the current AI revolution, have. The first is that they're black box, which means that, of course, we know how we train a neural network, but we don't really know why they train. We're making advances also on the mathematical side, but it's very hard to say what it actually trains and what the outcome is. And that has consequences, which I'll explore in a minute. Also, there's a completely new way of tackling problems. These neural networks work best end-to-end. And by that, I mean that the usual philosophy that we would have as engineers or as problem solvers, where we say we have a big problem, we compose it into small sub-problems, we solve each of these, and then put Humpty Dumpty together again to have the solution for the whole problem. That's actually not how these networks mostly work. So do it directly. For instance, translation. Why not have a lot of examples in data from one language to the other, and then it will actually learn how to translate. And taking these two together and also emphasizing the reliance on data is the last point I put here. So it is a little bit like we're programming through optimization on data in an unknown programming languages. Or to put it in a different way, the programming is done by the neural network. We as well, we are now not programmers. We as people who want a solution are now becoming more like constant gardeners on feeding data into this programmer so that it has the right solution. And this programmer comes up with a program that we cannot audit. So we don't know which numbers or neurons we need to change in order to actually affect the outcome. And that phenomenon is normally referred to as software 2.0. So I give you a few consequences which every developer will kind of jump at right away and which are really awkward and which are at the heart of why we need to rethink the tool chain that we have and probably why it's going to be affected rather heavily. The first one is quality assurance, right? So as I said, black box means we don't really know what the outcome is. What you see here on the picture, and there's a YouTube link, is a fantastic work by someone who used a neural network to fool another neural network. And that network that was fooled was actually meant to be used at customs and to see whether a certain shape is a gun. And what these people did is find the coloring on this turtle in such a way that under any angle, the original neural network that was meant to detect a gun actually thinks this turtle is a gun. So watch this video. This is amazing. So it tells you that in order to do QA, we need something different that we currently do. We can't encode kind of check what it is. We need more examples, and many of them, and likely the list of examples won't be exhaustive to the problems or kind of potential problems that this network has. And we need to be aware that there are failure modes we will not be able to enumerate before. So that has consequences of where we can apply these neural networks. For instance, maybe not in very critical systems, but also how we deal on the software development side with QA in general. The second point, let's assume it's all good and we actually had a way of getting QA done properly. Then that would be the left box. So we have a neural network. There's a retraining logic if the data or the data shifts, which can be the case. We have the training data that might have to be adjusted, and we have this magic monitoring that we had. And now imagine that you want to use a normal service architecture, microservice architecture, that doesn't chime very well with the fact that you want the service boundaries to be independent. Why? Because you hit a combinatorial explosion problem. So each service would now have its own training data and it would have to deal with things that, let's say a data drift. So example, if you want to build a self-driving technology, imagine it kind of one part or one of these services would deal with incoming images and would try and understand the world around it, or the localization, where it is, which lane it's in, and so forth and so on. It would mean that if you go into a different country, you might find that you need to retrain this network. So the monitoring becomes an issue, and you would have to do that for each of these services in place. So that's it's a tricky problem, and these kind of architectures need to be rethought. Last but definitely not least is the compute challenge. So today we're doing most of the compute on GPUs. Why? It's a sort of self-reinforcing stereotype, I would say, because we had GPUs which were sort of cheap compute architecture when deep learning became popular and actually started to work. We use backpropagation. That's essentially gradient descent. Maybe we could do something else. We need data to be supplied to these compute units quickly, because we really do a lot of compute at scale. And if we do that, most of our tool chain today would actually control this compute from the CPU layer. But between the GPUs, you could also have actually a logic. So should you have one control plane or several? And the tooling that we have at the moment is a problem. Paying a price to this is that actually currently major frameworks like TensorFlow, PyTorch, JAX, and so on are actually not backward compatible. So you might think, okay, then I stick it into a container and maybe run it in the future as well. But that's also a bad policy, because likely the reason why this is changing is that it makes a compute an order of magnitude cheaper. And for simple price reasons, you're not going to be able to do that. So essentially, we're back where we were in the 1970s, where the major hardware paradigm is in flux. We're no longer on a purely von Neumann-ish architecture. So let me maybe outline the current state of mitigation around this. For quality assurance, I think there were a few talks today, and I also know that there's in the JKU, Johannes Kepler University in Linz, the initiatives to kind of have a TÜV, if you like, for AI products, for non-critical systems. We also need common benchmark data sets where we can all assess how good our AIs are, and that's a critical need that is out there, and where we can all work together. On the architecture side, there are theoretical solutions now in few-shot learning, zero-shot learning, which exploit that neural networks learn representations of difficult to solve problems, and you can use those instead of having this end-to-end philosophy to maybe build your solution on top. Again, this is in its infancy, and I think every progress there is not ivory tower research, but will be affected very quickly into the real world. And last but not least, for compute, this is maybe the hardest one. We need open interfaces. We need new tool chains to really get the data more to the compute, and maybe also rethink how the compute is done. So I'll try and conclude and tell you why I hope I've convinced you that the current tool chain, if we want AI at scale, and I believe we do, will change. No one at the moment has a satisfying solution. Everything's in flux. I think the knowns, and also the reason why I believe in this forum it's really interesting and important to be aware of this problem, is the solution is probably all of us working together. We need open benchmark data sets. We need models. So if this zero-shot learning and so on actually works, we should have jointly trained models, which is also cheaper for everyone, that can be reused, and that allows a sort of Lego-like data set. Data sets may be wrong. Lego-like building of models. We know that skills, in order to have a solution to all that, skills which are currently machine learning, problem solving, data engineering, and high performance computing need to merge. And last but not least, again, a clarion call. This is only something we can do together. And that actually is also, as you nicely said in the introduction, one of the reasons why our institute exists and is trying to advance that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael Kopp. This is very inspiring work, really, that the Institute is doing on the edge of AI technologies of today, at the cross-section between academia and industry. I will just start with two questions, actually linking your presentation to two other keynote speakers that we had the pleasure to host today earlier, until I give our audience some time to reflect on all this massive information that you gave to them right now and ask their own questions. So we heard earlier today Nikki Popper, who presented simulations on Corona, on the pandemic, as a use case scenario for artificial intelligence. And he gave answers to different and millions of questions during the pandemic or related to the pandemic. It's using data for Corona simulations in that case. Except for these kind of simulations, what are the main and most pressing society issues or problems of today that are driving these artificial intelligence research nowadays? What do you think are the main areas where we will see things coming to us in the future?
That's a good question. I think on a very meta level, anywhere where there's control theory, actually anywhere for where we have data, including medicine, including, as I said earlier, mobility, truly smart cities where maybe our CO2 reduction can be reduced. I mean, people are always interested in self-driving cars, as am I. But the next question is, so if we have them on the road, then what? Could we maybe all get from A to B while consuming much, much less and still have the mobility we want, but be much greener? How should we build cities of the future? Those questions we can tackle. I think it's interesting that wherever you have data, we should think of this kind of AI wave as a new meta method that can be applied. I, for instance, like very much work I've recently seen on, even in quantum mechanics, on basically finding a wave function for many, many, many atoms and simulating material properties there. So I think one should think of it as a key new method, like maybe when calculus came out a few hundred years ago, that will probably pervade anywhere. But here the specialty is you need enough data and so on. So for me also, healthcare would be a great thing, obviously the pandemic as well, but we need the data and we need it in I think there were other speakers earlier, in a privacy conscious way being maybe shared. And I think we're all groping in the dark and hopefully get there.
Exactly. And also touching upon the trustworthiness of the artificial intelligence ecosystem and the results. Dr. Clara Neppel from IEEE earlier mentioned us some standards and certification that could help these artificial intelligence new use cases to develop, building trust within the users. So let's go to the self-driving cars again that you mentioned, for instance. What's your take on that? How are certifications and standards helpful in that?
I think they're very helpful. I think anything that can make the trust better is helpful. But I would say one thing. This technology is different to what we had before in the sense that, so not trying to say that this is human, but it has more human-like characteristics, meaning it fails like we do. Let me give you an example. I mean, every year we give our driving licenses to 18-year-olds, yet we do know there's a proportion that is higher, has a higher propensity to accidents than in other age groups. And yet there is this, we hold it as a social value to do that. I think we should see AI and its benefits and assess it with the same leniency. We cannot ensure, and even if we have more process that will make surer, but we probably will never be able to ensure completely the functioning of something. We can say it has millions of tests like we do. So we have a driving test or we have a university degree. And what does it mean? You pass these and these exams and so on. But does it really mean Well, we can't ensure that. Yeah? Correct. And I think for society, to me, it's a question of, do we as a society hold the benefits that this will bring? Do we hold that to outweigh the downsides that are there? And we shouldn't, in a sense, claim that they're not.
Very clear. And I will go to some questions from our audience now, since we have a couple of minutes more. And one of these questions goes to the technological part of your presentation. Is it worth to work to improve the current types of technologies, or should we invest on quantum computing on that?
Ooh, it's a difficult question. I mean, I'm not a total expert on quantum computing. My understanding on quantum computing is that and I might well be wrong, but that we're very far from, having anything usable unless we can formulate it in a Hamiltonian way, which kind of this quantum computer can solve, or at least that's my understanding very quickly. So I would say today, I would personally, and if someone's different opinion, they may well be right. I'm really not an expert, but I would say maybe improving these methods or these technologies that are outlined before in future learning and so on, they would have a massive impact in maybe defining what the future architecture for all of us will look like that can successfully and scalably do that. And again, I believe that we all need to work together, both in data and sharing it responsibly, but also in having models that are trained, maybe adversarially trained on this data and which are reusable. And because I don't think anyone, sorry.
Yeah, great. That's exactly what I also wanted to ask you. Working together, what are the best ways for companies, commercial organizations to openly collaborate while still keeping their competitive advantages, of course, in the AI landscape?
I think this AI landscape has affected a change in the value chain of even IP. So, if you give out what is for you a little bit of your data to get everyone else to find a solution on your data, that is actually preferable to maybe the old model of saying, let's put some people in the desert, please don't talk to anyone, bring us IP. This when I said the black box thing, and we know how it trains but not why, also means it's very hard to see why a solution works and others don't. So at the Institute, we are hosting, doing this for the third time now, a competition at NeurIPS traffic forecast, which at its core has data from HERE Technologies, which is the essentially traffic data in the world. And the forecasting is really a new way of traffic forecasting, completely new. And I think, for HERE, the motivation to share the data is that it's small for its kind of cash, but it's large for academics to actually do this kind of research. And of course, everyone, including HERE, can take the solution. So I think there's a new kind of, like, if you then think, yeah, but what about the IP? The IP comes when you have a solution, right, which is mostly informed by trial and error, and everyone is too small for that, really. Then comes how the IP kind of is used. I think this new way of thinking needs to take hold.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Kopp, for your time, your insights, your expertise. Our time is up, but I'm really looking forward to the future findings of your institute and of your research. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, last but definitely not least, we're very honored to welcome a keynote speaker from a very well-known company, worldwide well-known, Amazon Web Services. Millions of customers are using Amazon Web Services cloud solutions to build applications with increased flexibility, scalability, security, and reliability. The AWS cloud spans 80 availability zones within 25 geographic regions around the world, with announced plans for 15 more. And also with 5 more Amazon Web Service regions. So customers across all industries are taking advantage of Amazon Web Services' low-cost, elastic, open, and flexible, secure platform. Now let me try this. Ms. Agnes Balázs is the Senior Client Executive for the public sector in Austria at Amazon Web Services. And today she will be addressing digital innovation. She's also joining us live today. A very warm welcome, Ms. Balázs.
Thank you very much. Hello, and welcome to my keynote on digital innovation. My name is Agnes Balázs, and I work at Amazon Web Services in Austria. When I was preparing for this keynote, I was thinking about what to present to you about digital innovation. I was looking at the topic, the future of digital business, of the B2B software days, and I was thinking, what would be truly interesting for you? What would give you added value? What are you looking to hear? And that leads me straight away to the topic, which is, hang on, I am not getting on to the next page, but I'm going to have digital help in just one moment. And that is the topic of working backwards from the customer. This is one of the keys of how Amazon and Amazon Web Services works. And what we do is we ask ourselves what we call working backwards questions. Who is the customer? What's the customer problem or opportunity? Is the most important customer benefit clear? How do you know what the customer wants or needs? What does the customer experience look like? We base our, like 90% of our products and services and our innovation directly on what the customer is asking for. And only about 10% are services and products that we develop because the customer is giving us certain signals and we interpret them for the customer and we think and believe that this is something that they're going to be looking for. Let me see if it works. It doesn't, but I'll give the sign. It did work? Okay, thank you. So Jeff Bezos already said that the working backwards process is not designed to be easy. It's designed to save huge amounts of work on the back end and to make sure that we are building the right thing. Meaning, if you're not thinking all the way back to where the customer is actually using the product or the service, you're not actually considering everything that can go wrong or right or what will be needed. And so what so many companies do is they build actually the product or service, then pass it over to marketing and say, okay, now go ahead and create a press release, tell the world about it and sell it. But we don't do it that way. We do it the other way around. We first create two elements. One is something called an FAQ, a frequently asked questions document. The other is called a press release. How do they work? The first thing we do is we get into a group of, get one or several groups together. Actually, that's another very interesting thing about how we do innovation at Amazon and Amazon Web Services. There's not one group working on one topic and then another group maybe having the same topic and then gets integrated into the first group. That's not the case. It's possible to have several different groups within Amazon or Amazon Web Services in different areas working on the same topic because we believe in innovating and failing and may the best idea win for the customer. So what we do is get together in a group and we imagine what could be all the questions that the customer could be asking around the topic. This drives the idea and often changes it completely. We iterate many, many times to rework these frequently asked questions. And then, parallel, we are also trying to create the press release I was mentioning before. So what is it that we're actually telling the customer? What have we innovated or created as a new service or a new product? And this brainstorming is going on again and again and again until it's reached a level where it actually gets a sign-off. And one of the most heard comments when we're discussing internally about business is, write a PR FAQ about it. It sounds also simple, and I'm trying to make it sound simple to you because one of the key aspects of these PR FAQs is to write them in simple language and very factually. We're not trying to make a sale. We're trying to actually tell the customer about the service and product so that the customer can decide how they want to use it. And this is also an important aspect. We are not writing it for ourselves internally. We're not writing it so that we can sell it to management. We are really writing it for the customer. And, of course, as you know, many of our innovations have actually been created this way. Amazon was founded in 1994, with Amazon.com going live in 1995. Then, when we saw the success with the books, we started thinking about what else is it that customers might want, and decided they might want to buy over the internet also CDs and DVDs. Then Amazon Web Services was created in 2006, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a little bit. In 2007, Kindle and Prime were created. And also with Kindle, for example, the very original idea of who's going to want to read in a clunky piece of machinery. And we iterated that thought again and again until we found something that truly delighted the customers, and the customer was satisfied. Then we invented video, groceries, Alexa and Echo, bookstores, and one of our latest innovations from Amazon perspective was Amazon Go. We were thinking about what do the customers want when they go into the shop? What would they really like? And we realized they would just like to take their stuff and go out, not have any lines, not have any checkouts. And this is exactly what Amazon Go does. And it's not yet in Austria, it's not yet in Eastern Europe, but it is, for example, in the UK. And if you've been to a country and have experienced it, everyone is so excited about it, just to be able to go in, put into their bag whatever they want, and they walk out. And then they can check on the app, on their phone, the receipt, just if they want to make sure it's truly working. It is. And so, how was Amazon Web Services created? So, Amazon was having much more IT needs during the pre-Christmas and holiday season, as well as for Prime Days. And these needs were so high that we were thinking, interesting, how could we optimize this? And that created the idea that if we have these needs, some of our potential customers could be having these needs, maybe at other times than us, everyone within their own context of their business. Excuse me. And we wrote a PR FAQ about it, of course, what else? and decided to try it. First, we started with simple server and storage capacity and really found that customers are very happy to just use what they need when they need it, and just pay for what they're actually needing and not have the rest of the hardware standing around the rest of the year. So this is how we were created, with the first services, and then back to what I was telling you before, iterating on what the customers were asking for. So first it was compute, storage, and there's more and more interesting aspects that were brought in from our customers. And let me give you one example. Netflix, one of our really well-known customers, I mean, they're using from the normal compute and storage capacity, you can imagine, they're streaming globally to millions of customers, and at the same time, they're analyzing who is looking at what, when, and trying out new features. For this to be simple and easy, they're using Amazon Web Services because they can just spin up a server, spin up whatever services they're using, try it out. If they don't like it, they stop using it, and they've only paid for that. Sorry. And I wanted to come back and just mention, because I didn't actually dive into that, another really important aspect for us is patience. So even though we are a company on the stock exchange and we do have quarterly earnings reports, we believe in focusing on the customer. If you remember, on Amazon early days, there was a lot of discussion in the media around when Amazon is going to make money. But we believe in patience because we have a vision and understand that vision, and just feel that the customer, when they experience our services and products, they will be delighted, actually, and they will want to use it themselves. And what we do is we continuously innovate. So, digital innovation is not only about technology. We've been focusing on that, but actually, when we're looking at these PR FAQs and when we're talking about what we would like to create new, we are looking at a complete batch of topics, probably not unfamiliar to most of you. Innovation has been studied for many years, if not decades already now, and there are a lot of theories around it. But very often, the implementation is not as successful because people are not being consistent and considering really all these aspects and then pulling it through. And these are, of course, people. We're still dealing with people. So whatever technology you have, if you have not understood how people are going to be using it, what it means to them, there is some chance that you will fail. Then the processes are highly critical. If I'm in sales, if I'm talking to my customers, this is one of the first things we discuss, is to understand how the technology is actually fitting into the processes, and if processes need to be changed for technology. And often there's resistance around this, as probably you know yourself. There's, of course, the business aspect, costs, value. Operations, the people need to have the know-how to understand how they're going to implement it. Digital innovation is just such a buzz expression, just innovation itself as well. What it really means is to really take all these different aspects into consideration and understand there will be change. And very important not to forget, very often in the media, is governance and security. Of course, that is just an integrated part of the whole concept. What does it bring you? Why are people trying to innovate? Because they want agility, they want flexibility, they want scalability and reliability. Let me give you as an example our customer Zoom. Most of you unfortunately experienced about a year ago when suddenly nobody could meet anyone and Zoom had an incredible boom because the average Joe or Jane didn't have to buy Zoom. There was a certain contingency you could use for free, and everyone was going on Zoom, checking in on their family and neighbors and friends. And Zoom is one of our customers building on AWS, and we enabled Zoom to scale up this incredible amount of capacity they suddenly needed in the shortest period of time. One very important thing I still believe, and it's quite close to my heart, is the accessibility of technology and the process you need for digital innovation. This goes from the simple topic we hear a lot about children from not so wealthy backgrounds not having the laptops or handies at home to be able to log into, be able to access school, but of course within the framework of Amazon to AWS. For me, this is very much about understanding how you can access the technology, how easily you can access it. And again, from an AWS perspective, you go on the internet, you click on our website, you click through and you can instantly with a credit card buy services. But very often there's a process behind it, in companies in particular, and is the process ready for you to actually have access? Or is it that you need to go through a lot of different people still, and if it's not set up in central purchasing, it's not actually accessible? So you can be super innovative and you can have a great product or service that you're delivering, but if people do not have a simple and easy access to it, it will be difficult for you to get to your customers. And one of the simple examples of this that we have is how to make a successful digital transformation. We always say you need to have a cloud center of excellence for AWS, because if you don't have people who are owning that know-how and processes and all these interlinking between management and all the different departments. So let me then tell you the four different elements how Amazon organizes for innovation. One of the ones we were talking about were mechanisms, which was the working backwards from the customer. Then culture. This is the culture of innovation. We have our leadership principles, and we are very much driven by following these guidances. At the same time, people having their own autonomy. There's architecture. So you have to have the tools in place to make it possible. And there's the organization, which is what I was mentioning about the teams, that we have different teams, sometimes working on the same topics, sometimes not knowing about each other. We call them 2 pizza teams, because in the US we say they can have lunch with 2 pizzas. That must be very large pizzas from a European standpoint. But usually 6 to 8, maximum 10 people are in these organizations. And all of these elements play together to make it happen. Because if one is missing, then usually it's not working. So now, coming back to you and your business. Of course, what you're looking at is how do you grow your new revenue streams? And how are you improving your operational and financial efficiency? You need to lower your risks and consider for yourself how to innovate. And one thing is certain, and that is change, as we all know. This is such a banal thing that you have heard a million times, I'm sure. But people are again and again surprised by it, as you can see it when you look around to the different organizations that have failed over time. And we also say there's no compression algorithm for experience. It means you need to go the extra mile, you need to do the exercise, you need to do the work, and then it's going to take you to where you want to go. So with this, go and innovate. And I ask yourself, how do you translate all of this for your organization, and what steps do you need to do to implement this? Thank you for listening to my keynote.
Thank you, Agnes, for sharing these insights with us about how Amazon does the process of digital innovation internally. I see many commonalities with the keynote presentation that we had earlier from Markus Gould on the customer experience. You mentioned that you start with the customer backward journey.
Yes.
And the customer was mentioned by Markus Gould as the hero, actually, and Amazon is doing the work of the mentor. You are doing the whole work on helping the customers really scale their businesses and their business models through the web services. I will jump right to the first question of our audience, which is going to a bit technical direction. Is it possible to choose at which country or continent the cloud data is stored?
So yes, just coming back to your first comment, I want to say that Amazon strives to be the most customer-centric company in the world. So this is our mission, and we mean it. So yes, actually the customer is able to decide on their own what region they're going to be using for their services. So when you're on the website, in the console, it is you who choose from our 80 availability zones and 25 regions globally.
Very clear answer. Thank you very much. So the customer is definitely in focus, even when the technicalities are concerned. There's also a large public discussion going on the technology giants worldwide. And this has also to do with regulation. Do you think, or are you worried in Amazon Web Services about the effects of regulation in the cloud storage, in the cloud business? What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure I can say yes or no in that sense, but for example, when GDPR came up, we welcomed the GDPR process, and AWS is actually complying with the GDPR in the cloud. What the customer is doing with their data, it's their decision. But we welcome these kind of processes because it brings clarity to the customer again, and gives a kind of framework. So I guess the answer about worry is no.
Yeah, it's quite clear. Amazon offers a large number of services. Where and how does someone start exploring this whole and huge portfolio that you offer?
That's an excellent question. So first of all, if you go onto the Amazon website, and you can click anywhere and say you want to be contacted. So it's really easy to actually talk to somebody. So literally a person will contact you, not just a chatbot. I just want to emphasize that. And ask you, what are you looking for? What's your business, etc. So I think that's a pretty good place to start, is actually contacting someone. Alternatively, we have really most of our information on our website. You will find so much details just scrolling through. But people are different. Some people like to read it on their own. The third aspect I want to mention is we have a lot of partners we work with. So consulting and technology partners who offer their services either based on AWS or with AWS. And that is absolutely a great way also to start.
Quite clear. Ladies and gentlemen, you can also check the frequently asked questions, of course, in the Amazon website. I think this was quite clear from your presentation, Agnes. I think our timing is running up. Thank you very much for coming to our studio today and for sharing with us your insights and your experience on digital innovation. Thank you very much, Agnes.
Thank you very much for having me. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Ladies and gentlemen, it's almost 1 p.m. as we promised. Glued to your seats, you made it almost to lunch. But things are not over yet. Things are just getting started. So from now on, the outcome of today is in your hands. Now starts your chance to network with other participants, to discuss your project, to discuss your ideas, and participate in pre-arranged B2B meetings. When do the B2B meetings start? At 2 p.m. sharp Vienna time. More than 1,500 meetings have already been booked, and you can still book more. We have still plenty of time and plenty of sessions for B2B meetings today and on Wednesday. What do you need to do? Check your agenda. And how do you do it? Very simple. You just go to your browser, to the line where it says Meetings on our window today. May I please ask you to try it now, please? But open it in a new tab. That way you can also listen to us while accessing your meetings. There you will just see a green button that says Meeting starts in 60 minutes or 90 or 120 minutes. But beforehand, just make sure that everything works fine. Everything will take place through your browser and you can check your camera and your microphone. One last thing that you should remember for your B2B meetings, please be on time. If you cannot make it on time, just send a quick message to your meeting partner to inform them. There's nothing worse than having to wait for your perfect match, not knowing what's going on. Is it right, Iris?
Absolutely. And in case you run across difficulties while you're trying to get to your B2B meeting match, you also have the option of calling your partner. So if he doesn't show up, there should be his or her phone number only visible to you. Please go ahead and use the old-fashioned way, call. Or you wait for us. What we do in the virtual world, just like 2 years ago in the real world, we drop into your meeting if you need help. We come by as visitors and ask, is everything all right? And usually it is, so we hope and trust that this will be the case this afternoon as well and during the next days. That leaves us now to wish you a fantastic lunch break. We're looking forward to reconnecting with you on Wednesday for the grande finale, Austria versus Sweden, and in the future of digital business. And tomorrow, Bettina Kerschbaumer will be your host for the keynotes with our partner country, Sweden. Thank you very much. Enjoy your B2B meetings. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen.